Order, please rise for Mayor Michael Fougere.
Good evening, everyone. We'll start the meeting with a prayer. We beseech the Lord to bestow wisdom upon members of this council in order that their decisions may be founded in justice and prudence. Amen. Please be seated. Well, we'll begin with the confirmation of the agenda.
I'll move the agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. A seconder, please. Councillor Murray.
Actually, Your Worship, can we do that with the adjustments that we have from the clerk? There's a couple of additions that are there as well.
They were circulated previously. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
so
good.
just, I'll second with those
Bryce, you
additions.
okay with that? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The minutes from the meeting of February 23rd, 2015.
I would move the minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Young. A seconder, please. Councillor Fundera. Any errors or omissions? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have a long agenda with many delegations. The first delegation is D15-28, Cliff Geiger. Good evening, Mr. Geiger. If you could identify yourself and who's with you. You collectively have 5 minutes for a presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Thank you.
You can turn the microphone on. Just you'll see a button. There you go.
Good, thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of City Council. My name is Cliff Geiger with Skywood Developments. With me is Tom Williams of Walker Projects, the engineer and planning consultants for Skywood, and Mark Geiger with Geiger Developments. After months of hard work, consultation, and planning, we are proud and excited to formally introduce you to Skywood, a new Regina community designed by the guiding principles of both Regina's new OCP and the City of Regina's Northwest Servicing Study. You have before you the proposed Skywood Phase 1 concept plan and Stage 1 zoning bylaw amendments. The Phase 1, Stage 1 concept plan encompasses 12.26 hectares of land, including the joint school use site, scheduled to open for the new school term year in September 2017, a park and mixed-use residential. The joint-use school and adjoining park with full-size soccer pitch, boarded hockey rink encompasses 5.14 hectares. We envision this area as a focal point for the community. Today, we seek your approval on the general neighborhood plan and the detailed Phase 1, Stage 1 concept plan, which will enable us to start building this community. We thank City Administration for working collaboratively with us and our consultants through the development of these plans. Mark and Tom are available to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Appreciate that. Are there questions of the delegation? Councillor O'Donnell?
Thanks. Good evening, gentlemen. We'll just add a little bit to the discussion, if you don't mind. I noticed from the public engagement, so when they asked you a few questions about things like crossing, and there are some fairly major streets. Can I get you to comment from, because there are 2 schools going to be in the area, about people getting across that, so if you don't mind.
Well, as my understanding is once the project gets developed, they're actually going to look at stop signs or stop street lights at the corner of McCarthy and Diefenbaker, but there'll still be controlled intersections at that time, right? So.
Yep. Okay, thanks very much. And you ask or mention a little bit about the width of the streets and if there's parking on both sides or not, please.
Yeah, it's my understanding that there's going to be sidewalks on both sides of the streets. We're going to have an 18-meter or 20-meter right-of-way, depending on where you're located. And we actually just widened the roads next to the school itself to allow parking for the buses as well. So,
good, thanks. And my last question is not so much about Phase 1, but about Phase 2, because it is part of the Evraz buffer. And so could you just give Council a general notion as to what may or may not be?
Through the Chair, the Phase 2 will be commercial use. We're not exactly sure the uses that will be going in there right at this point, but it will have to accommodate the residential right beside. So in the Everest freeze, because of that, we'll have to, like I said, do do something that'll help with the residential.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Other questions? Councilor Flagel.
Thanks, gentlemen. Good to see you back here again. The concept plan you're talking, what about directly north before Armour Road? There's going to be a gap in between there. You're going to go all housing right up to Armour Road from Diefenbaker?
Yes, that's the plan through the chair.
Okay. I found it interesting. I asked you the question of planning, but I'm going to ask you now. But why the name Skywood?
Well, through the chair, we kind of wanted to tie in a little bit with Skyview. We were the developers of Skyview, and the last name Wood kind of ties in with Lakewood, but also I have a grandson and a granddaughter, and their last name was Wood, so I thought, well, I'll maybe throw in Skywood.
Yeah, good, thank you. Have you been in discussions along the lines of Phase 2 to kind of work, as you know, there's other developments potentially, well, they've been approved at council for a small strip mall, for coffee shops, restaurants, possibly gas bar. Would that make you lean to that type of a thing in terms of having to be, because you can't go industrial, obviously, or even light, I'm not even sure if you can go warehousing in that section, so it would have to fall. People are asking because they're wondering, like, what's going on after the housing. Would it be something that would fall in line with, small office buildings with a coffee shop and a restaurants, et cetera, et cetera?
Through the chair, yes, exactly, Mr. Flagel, something like that. It would,
Okay.
right along them lines.
Okay. And if this goes through tonight, start date is when? Because I know you got deadlines by the government too, right?
Yes, through the chair, we do. We've need some temporary power by the middle of June, I believe, is kind of the deadline, and a full service site with undergrounds by the end of October.
Yeah, okay, good. The school, one more thing, and I asked this at planning, why have they changed designs? Because typically the school and the playground are against the road as opposed to the way you've got this designed where you have the road, a fence, a backyard, a house, a front yard, and then the street, and then the school. So you got like 5 things in the way, where if I look at Ruth Pawson School, the playground is right at the road. Is that a new design, or, because most of the schools in Regina are not set up the way you're building this one?
Through the chair, at first, actually, my preference would have been on the corner of Diefenbaker and McCarthy, but in consultations with the province and the school boards, actually, more so the school boards, they don't want to be on any arterials or major arterials. They would like to be on collectors or local roads, and so that's why we needed to bump it back off of Diefenbaker and McCarthy.
Again, that was a question that was asked. So thanks very much, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel. Councilor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, gentlemen. There have been wastewater surcharge issues in the Lakewood area, which is right next to you, and you're doing something about stormwater, wastewater, so that's not a problem. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Mr. Chairman, I can answer that question. I think before any houses or the school actually opens, there's actually going to be a sewer trunk that's actually going to go down McCarthy Boulevard essentially from Rochdale up to that section. So actually going to relieve the surcharging that happens in Lakewood right now.
Thank you, Councilor Young. No other questioners? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery. We'll now consider the report 15-18, the proposed Skywood Phase 1 concept plan and zoning bylaw. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Proposed Skywood Phase 1 concept plan, stage 1 zoning bylaw amendments. So as you've heard from some of the discussion, there will be a area called Skywood, which will have up to 1,500 to 1,600 people living there, the dwelling units, which could be anywhere between 600 to 650 of various types, from low density, medium, and high density. There will be no industrial in Phase 1. That was part of the reason why we had a discussion here. That will in fact occur in Phase 2, and that is a direct relationship to the Everest buffer that's there. There is a 2.57 hectare park and school site, and the park will accommodate a full-size soccer pitch and a boarded skating rink. Joint use elementary school is really the impetus for why we're having this discussion today. So you can see that this is a growing area, but right now it's in the middle of nowhere. So people will come, and we've had a lot of discussions about this in the past about what will be along the area along Pasco Street North and what is in the neighborhoods here, and I think this will fit in very well. Planning Commission is looking for concurrence.
If I get a second for that, we'll continue to debate. A second report. Councillor Flagel. Speakers to the report. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. Just a few words, and I guess to the administration, first of all, the planning is mostly done by the province in terms of the road network that we're talking about. Did we suggest anything differently, or did we argue this or agree with it, or it's just people are wondering as to, like as Mr. Geiger said, he would have preferred it be on the peripherals of the major roads. Is that something we get involved with, or does the provincial government just go, hey, this is it, this is what we're doing, so on and so forth?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. We worked with the developer to accommodate both the needs of the school board and their requirements, also the requirements of the developer. It was trying to find a good balance between our collector networks and our arterials to make a plan where it could be phased appropriately. So as we said, there was some requirements with the province, but at the end of the day, the design was worked with our engineers and the developer's engineers.
Thanks. Again, part of what goes on, because it's going to be part of my ward if that once it gets developed, the Phase 2, I know we're not really talking, but is that something, what I was talking about, strip malls, coffee shops, restaurants, is that basically all that can go in there, or could they look at some industrial type stuff that could be a detriment to the residential side as well?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, when we look at the next phase, we're going to be looking at uses that are compatible with residential. So something like heavy industrial or something like that would not be compatible.
Perfect.
So we'll be doing something that meets the needs of the community.
Okay, good. No, this whole development, it's been a long time coming. The school board, we've obviously fast-tracked it through, which had to be, and they want this thing up and running by 17 or 18, I forget exactly, the 17, fall of 17. So that's good for the Northwest, not just my ward, but for all of it, because the schools are busted. And this is going to be a great asset to the area, whether it be Ward 10, 9, 8, 7, you know, whoever's going to utilize it, it's going to be there. And with the schools changing and the population growing in our city, this will be, what, 3 that we're going to be getting? You know, whatever that adds to 2,400 kids. I don't know how many kids go to these schools, between 600 and 800 probably. So if you got a maximum of 2,400 new desks for these kids to be in, it's just another great reason why people want to continue to move to Regina, because we are thinking ahead. And I want to applaud the administration and the Geiger Group and its consultants for, you know, this has been fast-tracked for them too. So it's not like it's just they've had 7 or 8 years to think about it. The government came up, provincial government, and said, now. And they've responded. So I appreciate it, all the help, and let's get this done. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks to the presenters. 2 questions here. We're in the midst of determining our new service agreement fee rates. What rate will this neighborhood be charged?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, this neighborhood is currently within the interim phasing, so we'll be charged the rates that are in place right now.
Okay, thanks for that. And also, I wonder if somebody could comment on the municipal holding ratio of this neighborhood, how it relates to other neighborhoods. Municipal holding, of course, as I understand it, is all things municipal within a neighborhood, including green space. Will this neighborhood have comparable green space to other neighborhoods? Thanks.
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, this neighborhood requires the 10% dedication, and that is what has been achieved.
Okay, and the school site, how does that relate to that 10%?
Ms. Harlock?
In this case, we were looking at the school site as part of the MR, so it does have the school site included within the 10%.
Okay, so I think that's in response to the province requiring that we do that. Supposing we hadn't have done that, how much more green space would this neighborhood expect?
Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, the school site encompasses 2.57 hectares of land.
Okay.
So what we look at is we look at the total area, and then we times it by 10% to get the ratio for the municipal reserve dedication.
Okay, so the school site's 2.7 hectares, and the entire municipal holdings would be,
Just give her a moment to.
sure. I understand this is a number you might not know off the top of your head, but do you have a ballpark?
She's calculating it. Ms. Horlock?
The subject property is approximately 48.62 hectares in size, so it's 10% of that.
Okay. So the school site represents about half of the green space. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Other questions on the report? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next delegation is Mr. Adam Smith. Very famous name. Mr. Smith, if you could identify yourself, who you represent, you have 10 minutes or 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of City Council. My name is Adam Smith, and I am a co-founder of Multinational Brewing. Multinational is a startup brewery company that specializes in unique and small batch craft beers. We are excited about bringing this new and exciting beer to Regina and thankful for the opportunity to address you today. I would first like to thank Ms. Patricia Allery for being a concerned citizen and speaking today. Our hope is that through this process, any concerns that she has will be met and be fully understood by the end of tonight. Both my business partner, Kelsey Beach, and I are longtime residents of the Heritage community. We love living in Heritage, and since we started looking for a space for our brewery, our goal has always been to find a location within our neighborhood that meets our basic infrastructure requirements while remaining central and accessible to people living and working downtown. After an extended property search, we believe we found such a location at 1130 15th Avenue. The building has seen varied uses over the years, but has been vacant in recent years. Our business model, in line with many other craft breweries in North America, will see direct sale of kegs to restaurants and pubs, and beer sales will be available to the public out of the storefront in refillable glass bottles called growlers. Beers sold cannot be consumed on site. Creating a larger and more desirable center for shops and commerce along 15th Avenue will make for a more livable, complete community for Heritage residents. The neighborhood is undergoing revitalization. Businesses are being established and homes are being repaired, and we are excited to be a part of it. We want to create a more walkable, bikeable, and vibrant community by increasing services in the area. We've had lots of positive response at our open house, on Facebook, and comments on recent media coverage. Residents are excited about buying a local product right in their neighborhood. They're also excited to engage with their neighbors and be able to walk to the brewery. And all this excitement just reaffirms that Heritage is the right place for Multinational. As I mentioned, Kelsey and I live very near to the proposed location, 1 or 2 blocks away, respectively. Based on our feedback we've received, we foresee that our neighbors will be among our best customers. We're excited to be opening a business in a unique and diverse neighborhood. Heritage is where I choose to raise my family, and being a good neighbor is a core value of Multinational. We see it as being central to the success of our business. Thank you so much for your consideration, and I'll welcome any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for your presentation. There are questions. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. Thanks for coming. So let's chat a little bit, kind of like we did at Planning Commission. I want to start with, because not everybody, other than council, but not everybody else watching knows what the exterior of the building currently looks like and what you have proposed. So if you would describe that for me first.
Sure. The outside is a bit dated, I would say. Could use a paint job, and the paint on the wood on the facade is kind of falling off a little bit. We propose to completely beautify the space, just breathing life into it with refinishing the facade in nice reclaimed wood, giving the exterior a paint job, hiring local artists to do a mural on the side of it. The front door is in really rough shape. We'd like to fix that up, and then planting some hops to grow up the south-facing wall. It's a really beautiful plant, and we use it in our beer, so it's kind of a fun community building thing there as well. And we'd like to have a front area for people to be able to sit, for either people buying coffee at the brewery or just for anybody. If you're, like I said, if you have your Milky Way and you're walking by and would like a place to sit. You know, speaking of green spaces and places, we have a storefront which is almost a rarity in Regina, so we want to really utilize that storefront as best we can and invite residents and non-residents to visit that space and utilize it.
Thank you. You kind of introduced the notion of coffee, so would you describe what you have in mind there, please?
For sure. We're hoping to be able to sell coffee to people as well as the beer-to-go sales. Just having the doors open. We pay the same rent whether or not our doors are open, 2 hours a day or 8 hours a day. So not many people are buying beer, so we'd like to get people into the space, and we really hope to make it a community space where people can come and have a coffee and chat, as well as, be able to pick up your beer and take it to, a friend's gathering.
Okay, thanks very much. Describe for me, if you don't mind, the area around it. Is there other businesses close by?
Just kitty corner across the street on 15th Avenue, there's another strip mall, and it houses, I believe, 4 businesses. There's Hemp Haven, which sells hemp products. There's a barber shop. There's Precious Earth, which sells, I would say, environmentally friendly home and baby goods, as well as Daisy's Pantry, which is a nice from-scratch restaurant, which I live around the corner, so I enjoy having all of that in my neighborhood.
And would you say that this little corner has been alive as a business in various degrees, but it's been alive as a business for a while?
For sure. I've heard people visiting old restaurants that used to be there, and I've seen a few things. I've lived in the neighborhood now for 10 years, and I've seen a few things come and go out of it, and it's really, with who they have in there right now, I know all the people really well that run each thing, and who they have in there right now is it's a really strong and vibrant space in the neighborhood, I would say.
Thanks. I know that often the notion of smell and a brewery go together, so would you mind commenting on smell and brewery?
For sure. With brewery, a lot of people think of the old Molson plant that used to be here before they shut down and moved to Alberta, but they would emit a lot of odor because of a few things. A, they were brewing on an industrial scale, which is, I can't even fathom how much beer they were making, but it was thousands and thousands of liters, tens of thousands of liters. And they would also just because of where they were located, they were able to just let their evaporate into the, just outside, and then you could smell that. We are going to be mitigating that by using a technique used by several breweries, or brew pubs in town, like Bushwhacker, Brewster's, anyone that's brewing on a small scale, where we turn our steam back into water by condensing it, basically running it through a still, and then it just drips down into the drain. So that way, if anybody's been to the Bushwhacker, they've got those big glass windows. You can see them brewing while you're having a sandwich, and it doesn't smell at all.
Good. Thanks very much. So my last question is this notion that you're doing where it's not a restaurant, you don't sit down and have your craft beer and so on. Is this novel, new? Is this something new to Regina, Canada?
It's new to Regina. There was a place in Saskatoon called Prairie Sun that's doing it. It's a business model that's very big in the craft beer industry in America. That's where a lot of our influence is coming from. It's very big down there. And even out west in BC, this is starting to crop up, and there's a pretty healthy craft beer scene out there.
Good.
Me and my partner, Kelsey Beach, we don't have any interest in running a bar. We don't want to be up till 3 a.m. I've got a little girl, and I don't want to be working every Friday, Saturday night till 3. That's not our idea. So we want to make great beer and sell it and have people be able to come and get it. So, yeah, we want to create a city, and our neighborhood first because we live there, because we're selfish, and create a nice space that people could come to and enjoy great beer, and you could walk right up to it. So.
Thanks. So just because of what you just said, what are your hours of operation?
For sure. So for coffee, I'm not 100% on coffee yet. Hopefully we'll be open for the early risers. But for beer, we're going to be open 11 till 9.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Any questions for the delegation? Thank you, Mr. Smith. You can return to the gallery. And now I understand that Patricia Alvey may be here, even though this is a communication. If she's here? Apparently not. Okay, I'd like a motion to accept the communication.
Your Worship, I'll move the recommended disposition of the communication.
And seconder for that, please. Councillor Bryce. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So they'll go to the report now. This is 15-19, application for contract zoning for the microbrewery. Councillor Donald.
Thanks very much. The address is 1130 15th Avenue, and I think from both the presentation and the question you heard a lot. This was always been a little commercial area. In fact, some of us from the East End, whether we were teachers or students, bought French fries and so on from what was there in Chinese food. So it has a long history in the neighborhood. The building right now is not in great shape, and so these young fellows are looking at improving both the structure and, in my humble opinion, the neighborhood. So you also heard that this is a novel idea, the brewery, microbrewery. I'm not sure, I don't drink beer, so I'm not sure what the right term here is, but anyway, they will distill a product, and it'll be available so that you can just take your glass container in and get that and take it out. Planning Commission looked at this as being very favorable. I'll be looking for a seconder for this, please.
Please, for it. Councillor Young.
Thanks very much. And we like the novel, the newness of this. We like the idea that both the community association and other business owners in the area welcome this. We thought this was a very healthy situation. Concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Other speakers to the report. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I do rise in support. Initially, when I looked at it, I thought, is this what we need in a transitional neighborhood? Is it something that will add value? Is it going to bring a better quality of life to the community? And the more I realize that this is a separate and distinct community, much like many other communities within our city, that really, although we don't really have borders on them, often people will stay within their community. If they're given a chance to stay in their community, they can support their local businesses around them, and whether that's a baker or a butcher or a brewery, why not provide them with the opportunity? If we were to say no to this today, it wouldn't happen. And I'd love the idea of an entrepreneur going out there trying their very best to do something that they're excited about that's going to improve the community. So I'm definitely in favor of Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, thanks a lot for your... Once again, through you, Mr. Mayor, thanks for your presentation, Mr. Smith. Yeah, I'd just like to say as a councillor for that neighborhood, I've really heard a lot of feedback about this. The majority of it has been positive, actually. People are excited to see this type of economic activity close to home. There have been a few legitimate concerns. The big one, I think, on my mind is the smell of having what we would otherwise consider an industrial activity in the middle of a neighborhood. But I really appreciate through good community consultation that I think has been addressed. You know, a piece of technology that means instead of airing the smell, it'll go down a drain. So I think that really speaks to good process from the city. And yeah, I'm excited. I live quite nearby. I'm excited to see this come in, and I think we should all be excited. There's a little craft beer revolution happening in Regina, and I think that's a great thing for our city. So I look forward to supporting this motion. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Other speakers on the report? I would just add my support for the application. I think it's a great innovation, and nice to see some different types of craft beer coming here with the microbrewery, so it's good for the community. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move to the next report, an application for bylaw amendment. Councillor O'Donnell.
So the address is 4121 Queen Street, and we're looking for a slight change to one of the lots that's there. There is already a, what's the word? A supportive living house that's going up on one side. In order to facilitate some additional parking, they wish to amend the lot that's beside it. It is a natural grass area. It is not something that we maintain, and they're looking at including that lot as part of the development so that there's additional parking. We saw no problem with this. Again, Planning Commission would look for concurrence.
Seconder.
If I could have a seconder?
Councilor Bryce.
Thanks very much. That's it. Concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Pretty straightforward. Comments or questions on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Planning Commission again, Councilor O'Donnell.
Application for a concept plan and zoning bylaw amendment, 3960 Green Falls Drive, the Greens on Gardner subdivision. This is an application for a particular parcel to be rezoned from semi-detached to medium-density residential. This is on one edge of Chuka Creek. It's on the very edge of this development. There is an increasing demand for this type of housing as compared to the single family that was proposed earlier. And so, again, we had no problem with this. I would look for a seconder on the motion.
Seconder? Councilor
Thank
Young.
you. And we'd look for concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Comments, questions? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Back to delegations. Crystal Spooner. Good evening, Ms. Spooner. If you could identify yourself, tell us who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there'll be questions afterwards.
Good evening, Your Worship and City Council members. Thank you for having me at this presentation this evening. I am the developer CEO of Orange Tree Village, which is a unique housing concept that will be housed out in Harbor Landing. It will be located directly beside Hope's Home, the proposed site for Hope's Home, across from Haviland Park at Tudor Way and James Hill Road. This program is innovative because it includes a diverse range of housing options for seniors. So not only do we have low-income housing available, we also have independent housing with enhanced services, and we have a personal care home along with a specialized memory care wing. It's also focused on community inclusion, so we do have services that are open and encouraged for the public to use as well, such as a coffee shop bistro, pharmacy. There'll be some medical services available as well, physician, dentist, and allied health and osteopath. We will have a school housed as well, and it is Prairie Sky School, and their foundation is based upon the inclusion of arts, community and service-based learning, along with nature, which fits very nicely with our overall concept for the complex. There will be opportunities for intergenerational programming, which will occur spontaneously, as well as intentionally inclusive programming options. Really, the foundation of the project is getting back to basics and how do we facilitate those relationships amongst our 2 fastest growing demographics, which are children and seniors. And there's lots of synergies that are valuable to both demographics. So I thank you for having me here today, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you may have regarding the project.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart, for your presentation. Are there questions? Councilor O'Donnell and Councilor Fraser.
Thanks very much. Thanks for coming and thanks for taking some questions. So I want to just introduce, because it was part of the discussion at Planning Commission about Hope's Home. It's an adjacent, next door, right across the street from you. Is there any relationship between what you're proposing and what they are doing?
Yes, we hope to be able to offer integration between our services and programming.
Perfect.
Yes.
You mentioned about potential pharmacy, potential coffee shop, or those types of things. Is that going to be open to the public?
Correct.
Yes.
Yes. That's part of the community inclusion concept as well.
Right. Thank you. So in terms of the supportive living facility, it actually is leveled. It will be 4 stories in height. Am I correct?
That's correct.
And is it leveled care?
Yes. Okay. So we have independent housing that will have some enhanced services for it, as well as home care agency offered on site, so it can be built out at 15-minute increments as opposed to having somebody come in for 2-hour, 3-hour blocks of time, as well as the care home, which will provide care through to end of life.
Thank you. Whenever an institution comes into a neighborhood, people are often concerned about parking and drop-off and so on. Can I get you to describe what you have in mind for school drop-off or emergency vehicles, I suppose, or those types of things? How does that work on this site?
Sure. The school drop-off has a separate site, separate entrance as well, which is further away from the main doors. Of course, they're welcome to use any of the entrances. We have a EMS specialized parking spot at the back entryway, so it's ease of access.
So they work separately?
They work separately.
Okay.
And we also have a lay-by driveway at the front
Okay.
to allow for drop-offs.
And is there a courtyard?
Yes.
Could you describe the courtyard and its purpose?
Sure. There's a recessed courtyard, which is all accessible at ground level, so that there's lots of natural light coming through into the basement, which is where the school craft room, multipurpose room, and movement room will be. So there'll be lots of activity, floor-to-ceiling windows, and also there will be lots of opportunity for the children and the seniors to interact.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councilor Donald. Councilor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, thanks a lot for your presentation. This seems like a really exciting idea. Certainly, seniors housing is a big issue now, and I think in decades to come, it's going to be an increasingly important issue. A couple of quick questions. Are there any other examples of this in the city, or can you point to other examples maybe across the country?
The closest things that would be in the city would be Wintergreen, which has the care home attached to it. There's minimal integration, is my understanding, between the two. There's no intergenerational concept there. College Park also exists with the Commons. They're having some retail space there. Again, it's meant for the community, not just for the College Park residences themselves. So it's quite unique. The reason why I would say that is because really the length of time that we're looking at forging those relationships between the children and the seniors will be extensive. So it won't be for the period of a year, a few weeks, or a few hours. It will actually be hoping that they stay with the school and progress from pre-K all the way to grade 8.
Okay.
So more rich dialogue and relationships developing.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. So supposing this goes through tonight, when do you expect to break ground and have people in the school actually functioning, people living there and the school functioning?
Sure. We would break ground early April, so in a few weeks. And we will be occupying in a phased-in capacity. So we'll start with the care home first and then fill the other locations. So between a 12 and 18-month period, we will be fully occupied.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. It sounds like a really exciting venture. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. Other questions? Councilor Burnett.
Thank you, Your Worship. And thank you, Ms. Spooner, for coming this evening. That I, like the other councillors, looks like a very innovative and creative approach. Since you've sort of been developing the concept, have you had an opportunity to kind of test the waters in the community? Have you had any sort of consultation, open houses and gathered the feedback? I'd be kind of interested in what kind of feedback you'd be hearing. That I certainly haven't heard of any complaints, but I don't know if there's any negative, but it sounds very positive. If you could just share the feedback you've received.
Sure. I would say it's been collected in an informal manner, so talking to current clients as well as family members, presenting to the school itself. It's been presented to SWAD, System-Wide Admission Discharge Department, which would be a primary referral for us through the healthcare system, and it's been very widely accepted. And we're getting calls after the Planning Commission to rent rooms and also for staff to come join us.
Thank you. I wish you well in your endeavor.
Thank you.
Councilor Bryce.
Thank you. So in vetting people who are allowed to rent apartments or space in your facility, how do you vet that you have the right people there to want to interact with the children? I'm just thinking of the security of the children, well, even the security of the seniors. How do we make sure that it's not somebody who's out on a warrant or what? I don't even know how to put that.
There'll be a screening process. Yes, there will be a screening process as well. Those that wish to interact with the children will have specialized planning according to that. Those that do not wish to certainly don't need to. That would be respected. I would say that in terms of our marketing, most of our marketing will come through Orange Tree Living, which will be our parent company. We'll help navigate individuals through the health system, and then we'll make recommendations as to where they may have their needs and their values most met. And that may or may not include Orange Tree Village or one of my other properties. It might very well include a competitor in town as well.
Thank you for that. What about pets? Are you pet friendly?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bryce. Other questions? I have one, and this is great innovation here. Where did the idea come from for you? There's not one necessarily you said in Regina, but is this a practice in other provinces, other countries?
The research that I did, majority of innovative housing solutions like this are occurring in Europe. Again, we're doing some on varying levels, but really nothing that's immersed where you live and breathe it the way that we will have the opportunity to in this project.
So this is truly some innovation that you've done
Yes.
here. Well
Yes.
done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions, you can return to the gallery, and we'll now consider the report. This is a D 15-22. This is the multi-generational care facility. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. It's a contract zoning proposed multi-generational care facility, and the address is 5540 Waterer Road, which is in Harbour Landing. Can I have a seconder, please, and I'll speak to it?
Councillor Young.
As you heard from the discussion, and I'm going to describe this specifically, in the basement there will be a private elementary school that may have up to 100 children and up to 6 staff members, a common area, and 4 affordable dwelling units. On the main floor will be 15 assisted living units with accessory dining, coffee, and medical services, and as discussed, that could be a pharmacy. Second floor, a special care home with 37 beds. Third floor, 26 assisted living units. And fourth floor, 26 assisted living units. This is, and I identified that in the question, right across the street from the previously approved Hope's Home. I want to describe a situation from an educational point of view that I'm familiar with from my past. Belfort Collegiate used to do something that I always thought was wonderful, and they've done it for decades. And what they did is they had the wherewithal, where there was a number of seniors' care homes around them, to invite those folks over for dinner and a dance. And the dance was with a high school student and one of the older folks. Now, I don't know who was more excited, the kids or the older folks, but it carries on, and it's a highlight. And if you ever see anything written in the media about it, or if you ever get a chance to talk to any of the folks that partook, they never forget the experience. So from my point of view and from an educational view, this is not just innovative, this is in fact the way it should be. And I like your questions, and the lady was very humble in her response. When we talked at Planning Commission about this, she was not aware of anybody else in Saskatchewan, in Western Canada, and we kind of stopped there doing this. So this is not just innovation, this is the way to do it. We would really seek your concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor Dowell. Are there other speakers? I'd like to see innovation, and wish her all the best of support in the new facility. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Executive Committee, this is the Riel Authority to Secure External Financing and Enactment. It'll be Councillor Fraser. You are the Deputy Mayor.
Okay, thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I'd like to introduce reports
15-23.
15-23.
Okay. Need
Yes.
a seconder for that, if I could, please?
Second, Your Worship.
You want to just explain what this is, Councillor Fraser?
Yeah, sure. This is Riel, the Regina Exhibition Association Limited, asking council for a $13 million allowance on their debts, borrowing limit.
Okay. So before we entertain the debate here, I would ask Mr. Schoberg to provide some background information from members of council on the report itself and what we're attempting to achieve here. Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, thank you. As mentioned, this report really speaks to debt financing related to Everaz Place's operations. There are some elements related to the stadium, which I'll speak to, but the primary focus of the report is around a long-term capital plan for Everaz Place, and of course the ability to support their operations through debt financing. The report, in some detail, speaks to the long-term plans that they've considered, and includes various things that are infrastructure, renewal and replacement, maintenance, things like HVAC, parking lots, lighting, software technology upgrades, vehicles, a whole level of maintenance, eaves, troughs, roofs, escalators, things of that nature. It also includes the potential for some food and beverage elements related to the stadium. And those elements, really, as we worked from a city perspective on developing the plan related to the stadium with Evraz as our food and beverage operator, we've treated Evraz similar to how we would treat any other third-party operator. So they don't get a pass from a city's perspective just because they're associated with the city. So typically these arrangements, as it relates to the food and beverage, require or include some contribution on a front-end basis. That allows them to capitalize on revenue streams, a percentage of revenue. So it's really part of their operations going forward. As we're looking at this, is really a typical operating arrangement, and it has the stadium users really covering these costs over the course of time. In our case, we don't require the operator to borrow. This is a decision, of course, Evraz is looking at. They may or may not. This really just provides them that ability or opportunity if it's needed in the future. In terms of our status, we're working on finalizing this. The food and beverage plans are still in the works. We're working on those details over the course of time. The other element I think that's important to note, again, there may be some misunderstanding or misinformation, but really at this stage, we're focused on delivering the financial plan for the stadium, which is $278 million upfront and $522 million over the course of the 30 years, and we're still on schedule and on budget to reach those objectives.
Thank you, Mr. Schoberg. There are speakers to the report. Councillor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I just rise, and I'm thinking about, wasn't that long ago when I was first elected in 03, that the grounds of the exhibition park, what they looked like in 2003. So we go back in time for a moment and ask ourselves, what was there? Many of us would remember there was a horse racetrack, Queensbury Downs. The name Queensbury comes from Queensbury Downs. So that was a horse racetrack, and if I look around the crowd, I can see a lot of younger folks that are out here. Some of our media folks may not know that because, frankly, unless you go back looking for the research, you may not be aware of it. Today, that's a state-of-the-art facility. It wasn't that long ago that it was something else completely different. So those buildings have been renovated, they've been modified, they've been adjusted, but have they been brought up to the current standards that are required? Do they have the HVAC that's required to be able to provide that? I remember not that long ago when we had our four-legged friends coming through the Brandt Center, you knew they had been there for a few days afterward. But upgrades and updates to that now allow us to be able to move the four-legged critters out, and we can bring in the skaters right afterward, and we can have a hockey game, and you don't know that there was an agricultural show in there. That's because of those upgrades and updates. And those cost money, Your Worship. It's not cheap to be able to fix that stuff up. So when I think about these investments and what it takes to play catch-up on some of this stuff, it's there. At the end of the day, we're creating a state-of-the-art, iconic facility in the stadium. We have a plan and a strategy to produce that stadium on budget and on time. And, Your Worship, we're on track to do that. We've just heard that, and we know that. That was part of the contractual agreement. What we also know is that Evraz, or Queensbury, have to be able to supply food and beverage services. They have to be able to upgrade and update and ensure that when we do Pancake Sunday during the exhibition park fun day that we all go out there and serve pancakes, somebody has to cook those pancakes. We need to upgrade and update to be able to do that. Your Worship, I'm heavily in support of this. This is going to take us to where we need to be, and this is a great investment for that community. Thank you, Your Worship. I am in support.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just some clarification that I know last year when we converted Real into a municipal corporation, it's my understanding that they were given kind of a business mandate that they are responsible to look at maximizing their revenues into the land use. And to me, part of, I think, if we have the expectations on increasing revenue, we need to make sure that they have the tools and the capacity and the flexibility to be able to operate much more like a business. And you mentioned on the stadium piece that they were not given a free pass, that there will be a request for proposals from a number of food vendors. So by not even having the capacity to know that the money would be there if they were successful, really complicates their ability to generate more revenue. So I guess my question is, am I correct in understanding that we want them to be much more business-like, create much more revenue, churn a profit, but we have to make sure they have the tools and ability to operate as a business?
Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, that is in fact true, whether it's for the stadium or the rest of their facility. We're certainly looking for them to operate on a business basis and create a great customer experience, but also deliver a financial return as well.
Thank you. I do know that in terms of, as Councillor Murray had mentioned, that there's a number of other capital upgrades that are pending and coming down, and I think they do need the flexibility to know they've got more legitimacy beyond just the one-year budget cycle or having to come back to council on a regular basis asking for more funding. So I'll certainly be supporting the request.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Other speakers? Councillor O'Donnell?
Thanks. So we have an appendix in here, and I've gone through it a few times. And while the material for food and beverage in the stadium has been highlighted, that is $4 million out of 13. There are a number of other items in here, and if you read through them, anything from IT, kick plates for hockey rinks, some radios, and so on and so on that you need to operate a very large facility are highlighted in there. But I also want to note that there's one other large item in there, and that is that there's $2 million set aside within this borrowing capacity. And if we look at a future knockdown of some buildings and building a new one, it's also been thought of and there. Not agreed to, but at least it's there. So there are lots and lots and lots of items in here that total up to $9 million other dollars that are really a reinvestment into the park. And as somebody who's been around the community for a long time, we know that decades ago the park didn't get some investment, and I think this is very wise and very prudent. I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers to the report? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, just to be crystal clear, the money that may be borrowed for these upgrades to make Evraz Place be able to give the service that we expect, and to be able to serve more people using Evraz Place, especially when the stadium is done and there will be food services, that in order to do that, if they use the money and borrow it, that they'll be paying it back with the revenues that they make at Evraz Place. It is not going to be property taxes that pay this back. Am I correct?
Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, certainly as it relates to the food and beverage component, that is the plan. This opportunity will create new revenue streams for Evraz that they don't have today, and that's been contemplated in terms of repayment.
And could I also ask, so then over the years they have brought in money to use to upgrade Evraz Place so far, and they've done that with the revenues they've made by people who use Evraz Place.
Mr. Schoberg.
Your Worship, that's accurate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's a couple important nuances for us to wrap our head around here. As mentioned by Councillor Burnett, REAL is a municipal corp, so it's sort of a city's equivalent to a crown corporation, that they operate as their own standalone business, but ultimately they belong to the city, and ultimately they answer to council, and ultimately, or the responsibility of council, I should say. They don't answer to council, but they're the responsibility of council, and ultimately they belong to the citizens of Regina. Of this $13 million, it's important to note that $9 million of that is not stadium related. It's other capital investments around the arts. I think that that money, to me, is money well spent. There's two types of debt. We can have cash debt that's on paper, but also infrastructure debt. Ultimately, if it's not looked after, it's future generations that have to pay for it. So I think there's a strong business plan in place for that $9 million. And I think that ultimately that'll be a good investment for REAL and for the city as a whole. There's been a lot of questions since this report came out about the $4 million that will eventually be put towards the stadium. So we should clear up a few things. First off, the hard cap that council's put on stadium spending is $278 million, not a small amount of money. This $4 million will, as I understand it, fall out of that, over and above that $278 million. It's also something we could call a soft cost. That is to say, it's not being used for concrete and that sort of thing of the actual stadium. It's being used for food equipment, deep fryers, I imagine, and cotton candy machines and all those things. But it's also important for us to note that those are necessary costs of a stadium. Unless we expect people to bring a bag lunch to a Rider game, those are costs that any stadium has to incur. So these are necessary costs, and also that because REAL is our company, that ultimately those debts are citizens' debt. They fall to the city. While there is, as Councillor Young pointed out, there's a plan in place to repay that $4 million. The risk of it, the liability, is ultimately part of the city's debt load. So the question I have, a couple questions here for administration. Number one, is this part of the plan? Like, has this been part of the plan all along, or is there some issue with that hard cap that this had to get pushed out of that hard cap of $278 million?
The hard cap remains in place, Councillor Fraser, but Mr. Schoberg will answer your question. Mr. Schoberg?
Your Worship, assuming you're referring to the food and beverage component as opposed
Thank
to
you. Yeah,
as opposed to
the
the
$4
full
million.
amount, as you know, as noted, Everest, this is part of Everest's long-term planning as it relates to food and beverage. Yeah, that has been part of the plan in terms of, as I said, the typical approach to contracts related to food and beverage, regardless of the provider, usually requires the external party to provide some level of upfront financing or contribution, in return receiving a revenue stream as related to it. So we're approaching this no differently.
Okay, thanks for that. And next question. So if there is a plan for all the soft costs, are there any other, if we can call them soft costs, which will fall out of that $278 million cap? Is there any other costs associated with the stadium that citizens of Regina should expect to someday fall on their shoulders?
Mr. Schoberg?
Your Worship, as I mentioned earlier, we haven't identified any. So at this point, we are still on track to achieve the $278 million and do it within the time frame identified by Council.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. So two thoughts. One, I don't really feel like we have an option other than to pass this here tonight, so I do plan to support the motion. And number two, we just have to watch. Again, the analogy was made at Exec Council that buying a new stadium or any of these big ticket items can be something akin to buying a new car. There's the ticket price, the sticker price, but it's the extras that can really add up. So we need to really make sure as we can that this is going to be the only extra for the stadium project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Bryce?
Thank you. So I just want to clarify for everybody through you, Your Worship, to ask. So this $4 million, it's actually not necessary unless the RFP process and Riel is the winner of one of the RFPs, because it's not like that would be the only concession, for example. Just put that portion of the money I wanted to talk about.
Mr. Schoberg?
Your Worship, to clarify, the city at this point has identified Evraz Place as the provider of food and beverage, and so we're not anticipating an RFP. What Evraz will do in conjunction with the city is develop a plan as to how to deliver the food and beverage. They may require financing and funding to support that. That's what this report speaks to, is giving them that flexibility. These plans aren't done at this point, but from the city's perspective, we've notified and worked with Evraz to let them know that we're treating them the same as we would any external vendor, and they'll be required to develop a contract with the city on commercial terms.
So why aren't we doing an RFP so we can have a variety of different food vendors at something like a stadium?
Mr. Schoberg?
Your Worship, there will be a variety of different vendors for sure. That's part of the plan. You may recall when we developed the plan for the stadium quite a while back, we determined that as opposed to going to the market generally at potentially a higher cost, that we looked at it and assessed that we had an operator in the city at the time. Of course, they weren't a municipal corporation at the time we made that decision, but our decision was on the basis that we had a firm within the city that delivers these services in a successful way, and for the community overall was the best result in terms of both service and the financial aspects. And so we've continued on that path based on the decisions made. At the same time, we're working with Evraz to ensure, as I said, that these contracts and things are structured on a third-party commercial basis.
So what happens to the volunteers and the fundraising groups that are now at our current stadium? What happens to them in the new stadium?
Mr. Schoberg?
Your Worship, that's the stage that we're at, as I mentioned, in terms of developing the plans. Food and beverage, event management, there's a whole range of plans that are required to support the stadium going forward. So we'll be addressing things like that, volunteer aspects which have a connection to the Saskatchewan Roughriders and how they operate during their games. So our work over the next coming months will be to finalize those details. Of course, we're working towards an opening of 2017, and it's a complex project with lots of moving parts, and we're working with our key partners, in this case, Everest Place and the Saskatchewan Roughriders. Obviously, the major attendance and the use of these food and beverage opportunities and things will be primarily during Rider games, but also will be available, and that's why we're working with Everest. This is going to be used year-round. So we want arrangements with our partners that anticipate all the things you've mentioned, the volunteer aspects, all the other things that go into putting on an event, and we're in those planning stages right now to work towards finalized contracts that will be in place by the time we're ready to open.
Thank you for that. I want to focus on the fundraising that the volunteers do rather than the actual volunteering. Are you in, or is somebody in the city, through you, Your Worship, in contact with the volunteer groups that do fundraising at the current Mosaic Stadium so that we have them as part of the input for the decisions that are made?
Mr. Schoberg?
Your Worship, yes, that's the case. Working with both Everest and the Riders, we are working with volunteer organizations to ensure their needs are addressed.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. How does this affect our borrowing limit as a city?
Mr. Archer?
Your Worship and members of Council, it would anticipate, subject to Riel actually leveraging that debt count as part of the debt obligation that we have. So it would reduce our capacity to issue debt, and in so doing puts us in the position of backstopping, if you will, the obligation that Riel would take on.
Thank you. I just want to re-ask a question, and I know we're not really supposed to.
I'm supposed to do it again, but...
Okay, so let me reword it first, and then I'll re-ask it. Have the seats in the stadium been paid for? Has the field been paid for? Is that all in this $278 million?
Mr. Schoberg?
The toilets, the bathrooms, everything?
Your Worship, the $278 million was made up of two large components. $250 million towards the stadium itself, and $28 million related to the site and things around that. So, yeah, certainly all those things are contemplated in those figures.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bryce. Other speakers? Councilor Fraser, you want to take the chair for a moment, please? Just an opportunity to comment on the report, and you know, in the larger picture of this report, we're looking at a reinvestment in the entire infrastructure of Everest Place, and that is the main focus of the report before us, is to look at issues related to HVAC and the parking lots, and adding new garage and recycling bins, and installing new spotlights, and a host of other issues that are of big concern of how we reinvest in what we own as the city, as a sole shareholder of Everest. So this is a great investment, and the question is, how do we invest in this to ensure that those assets remain viable and we get a return on the investment, including, of course, Brandt Center. There's some issues there to help on the hockey rink there. That is the focus of this report. It is a capital reinvestment program. The amount being asked for may not all be used. It is for a 4 or 5 year plan. And I support that. I know members of council support that executive committee. This is very important for us to continue to reinvest in Everest Place to make it viable. The leaky roofs, HVAC systems, all those things have to be replaced and looked at. And we can do this incrementally with our $400,000 a year and hope they can duct tape everything together. But this place needs a little bit of love, and this is designed to do that in a strategic way. I think that's very good. We've had some discussion about the $4 million that's there for Alvarez Play, or for the new stadium, and I want to reiterate and clear up misunderstandings here. Mr. Schoberg has been very clear on this one, but I want to make sure we don't have misunderstandings here. The hard cost of the stadium, $278 million. It is not. We have not expended money above that. And the $4 million may not be borrowed by Alvarez. They may not need to do that. It's how they actually respond to the request of providing food and beverage services. So let's be very clear here. I know that there's some discussion in the public about this. We remain on time and on budget. And it was fully expected that we would have a response to food and beverage, which is not a capital construction cost. It's an operating cost. It is not the same thing at all. To say otherwise is unfair and not accurate. And we should just take the moment to clarify those misunderstandings that are out there. We'll know in the coming months, in leading up to the stadium when it's actually operational, what those costs are. And it may well be this simply has been a placeholder, not used, or a portion of it used. So it's really important we understand we've not exceeded the limits, nor do we plan to. And as Mr. Schoberg has said before, and I'm repeating it, we're on time and on budget. And as members of council to support the report. Thank you. Other speakers to report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we move to bylaws. Councillor Fraser.
I move, seconded by Councilor Murray, the bylaws 2015-18, 2015-19, 2015-20, 2015-21, 2015-22, and 2015-25 be introduced and read for a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council has considered and approved 6 reports this evening and will now consider the associated bylaws. Bylaws 2015-18, 19, 20, 21, and 22 are proposed amendments to the Regina zoning bylaw as required by the Planning and Development Act, and bylaw 2015-25 is the proposed amendment to a borrowing bylaw as required by the Cities Act. If there is anyone in the gallery who wishes to address council on any of these proposed bylaws, I would ask you to identify yourself at this time. There is no one, Your Worship.
I'll call the vote on the first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Fraser.
Okay. I move, seconded by Councillor Fundura, that bylaws number 2015-18, 2015-19, 2015-20, 2015-21, 2015-22, and 2015-25 be read a second time.
All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Young, that council hereby consent to bylaws number 2015-18, 2015-19, 2015-20, 2015-21, 2015-22, and 2015-25 go to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Bryce, that bylaws number 2015-18, 2015-19, 2015-20, 2015-21, 2015-22, and 2015-25 be read for a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Move into delegations and related reports. DE 15-31. And then we have Stacey Getz.
Mr. Getz couldn't make it, so we'll have some new people. I'll come and read his submission.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thanks.
If you just identify yourself, and we now know who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, then maybe questions afterwards. But just for the record, please state who you are. If you want to press the... There, you got it right there. Oh, you had it. There you go.
My name's Laura Hayden, and I am the Secretary of RARC, and I'm here to represent Stacey Getz. Upon attendance at the Financial and Administration Committee meeting Tuesday, March 3rd, 2015, numerous issues were discussed in regards to this subject. Being we were given the floor to address the committee in the start of proceeding as well, we were only given few hours notice, and that this meeting was being held in regards to the subject matters. We were slightly unprepared as So in the submission, we will address the concerns that we heard discussed at that meeting. As for insurance questions raised, we carry property insurance for the improvements on the property for cash value, which also includes $2 million general liability, as well for a cost of $8,000 annually. We carry motorsports event coverage, which is $2 million liabilities, along with abiding by numerous provincial and national requirements for safety, faculty operations, and public health. It is my understanding from discussion with previous administrations of the city and my involvement with the members of RARC in the past 20 years, this land was secured by the city of Regina in late 1800s because it was deemed unsuitable for agricultural production, as well the abundance and accessibility water in which numerous wells have been drilled into the Zener and Condi aquifer from the turn of the century in the early 1900s, and only recently in the past couple of decades have been discontinued due to the added expenses of having to treat the water for domestic use with the Lake Diefenbaker pipeline alternatives. Regina Auto Racing Club has been the lease of the property since 1968, and in the track pavement first took place in 1970, 45 years ago, making Kings Park Speedway one of the oldest stock car facilities in Western Canada and northern United States, and one of the few that are paved. Even a major center like Calgary has lost their racing facility due to
Expropriation.
and city growth. Saskatoon has a new state-of-the-art facility, and the city assisted in relocating to a new location as that city grew and expropriated the land from the owners. The report table at the F&A meeting suggested that the land of 47 acres is worth $940,000 and a typical lease rate of 12%, like most appraised values. Suggest land value, fair market value are only values of the best guessed speculations. The real value is when the actual land is being sold, as stated, with the numerous wells that have been drilled on this parcel and used discontinued. The cost of the decommission these wells to make this land suitable to be sold could possibly cost more than what the net value could be realized. The current use of the parcel may be the best utilization of this parcel. The original request and report suggests a 10-year lease, as the City Act does not allow for a lengthier term of lease. However, a motion was tabled for a 3-year term and amended to a 5-year. We wish to ask for members to reconsider a 10-year lease and, if possible, include provision for an additional 10 years, as we are a small group of volunteers that apply our efforts and time with support from the business community. We will be undertaking the task of replacing our main structure on the property, namely our tower and concession booth, which will typically have a 20 to 40-year lifespan, and it is difficult to encourage support for such an undertaking with the glooming possibility we may not have the property in 5 years, as the lease will expire again. If I do recall correctly, the city has released its most current 20-year plan recently in the past few months, and my understanding is that the area is not slated for any urban, commercial, or industrial development, so a 20-year lease would be most graciously accepted as to coincide with the city's 20-year plan and the changes in 5, 10, 15, or 20 years.
Ms. Hayden, you have just over 30 seconds to go.
Okay, which may cede this land and annex from municipally, and shall give the volunteers and members, along with corporator supporters, a clear timeline when change of location may be amended.
Thank you very much for your presentation. There may be questions of members of council. Councilor Murray?
Thanks, Your Worship, and thank you for coming forward. Obviously, Mr. Getz, good to be here. I don't anticipate you'll have answers for him, but was there anything else that, I know you kind of got rushed at the very end, is there anything else that you wanted to add to make sure?
I don't think so.
You're okay
I think
with
I
that?
got through it all.
No, you did very well, so thank you very much for doing that, coming forward. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councilor Murray. Other questions? Councilor Fraser?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks a lot for your presentation. Could you speak to how many people benefit from this track in year? How many visitors would you expect in a season?
In a season or per race day?
Maybe in the whole season.
visits?
We're looking at about 3,000 people throughout the season.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Councilor Fraser. If there are no other questions, you can return to the gallery and we'll now consider the report. Councilor Murray on the report.
Thanks, Your Worship. I rise to bring forward CR 1524, and this is in fact a lease of a portion of the land that's defined as Southwest Quarter Section 13, Township 18, Range 19, west of the 2nd Meridian. So if you don't know where that is, it's up just north of a golf course we happen to have just north of the city. It's the old racing property that we have there that's been there for forever. So I've got a number of recommendations here.
That's seconded for you.
Sure, let's have a second
for
on the table.
Okay. Councilor Fraser seconds that.
Thanks, Councilor Fraser. Appreciate that. So Kings Park Speedway is what it's referred to. They've got a lease with the City of Regina, and the subject property through the Regina Auto Racing Club be approved under terms and conditions that are shown within the body of this report, and that a lease of the term of the subject property be changed from 10 years to 5 years. We changed this during the Finance Administration Committee because there was some discussion around, is this a good idea? Should we have something going this long? We'll come back to that because I think there may be a reason for us to consider going back to the administration's original proposal of 10 years. The Part 3, that the administration be authorized to finalize the terms and conditions of the lease documents, and Part 4, that the city clerk be authorized to execute the lease agreements prepared by the city solicitor. So, Your Worship, just to speak to it briefly, that club has been out there for a long time. They've done a lot of work to build up and to develop. They've got a paved track that's out there. They've got an infield. They've also got an area, there's a pit crew area. There's also a grandstand that's been built up. There's safety barriers that have been put in. There's a number of things that have been done to develop that space and turn it into what it is today, one of only a handful of locations where you can legally get on a track and race a vehicle in a controlled environment, in a place where it's safe to do so. And, Your Worship, those places are becoming harder and harder to find, and so it means that people may choose to go elsewhere on city streets, on provincial highways, to play with their automobiles and go fast. This is a place to do it safely. It's a place that's designed for it. And, Your Worship, the investment that's gone into this place is almost all dedicated by volunteers and by those community groups who've gotten involved. The idea of having a long-term lease works because simply this land does not have a huge amount of value. It isn't something that we're on the edge or the cusp of developing. As we've seen, there's development all around the city. We won't see the use of it there. The land's not designed, not very good for arable land that could be used by a farmer. You maybe could do ranching or cattle on it, but frankly, there's a lot of land that could happen. So at the end of the day, administration has given us a recommendation of a 10-year lease. I would recommend that we go back to that. There is other land in that vicinity that we also lease out to the Windy Flyers Club, which is a 10-year lease. So I'm just going to serve notice that at some point near the end of this, I would like to make a motion to revert back to the 10-year.
Will you have an opportunity on closing the debate?
I will do that at that point, just to let you know. Thanks, Your Worship.
The speakers would be Councillor Flegel.
Thanks. Yeah, I didn't, when this first came out, I just sort of looked at it and went, yeah, okay, but this is a noisy, dirty, loud, crazy sport, and this is the perfect place for it. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah, it is. You go out there. I used to golf and still once in a while with the Murray, and you'd hear those guys going, and all you'd hear is these guys yelling and screaming. It's not a drag strip, like you might assume, and it is just a place for these car buffs and car wannabes. It's like me going to the hockey rink and thinking I could still make it in the big show. Well, I think some of these guys still think they could drive the Indy 500. So, and that's great because there's a place for them to fulfill and live their dream, whatever it is. So, to change it and to allow, as the delegations just talked about, they're going to build this place up. They're going to put another concession. They're going to do things. They're going to do things. They're not coming to the city asking for money. They're just asking for 10 and now even a 20-year, which even in the real estate world, I don't ever see that land going to anything but the stock cars, the dirt bikes, the Windy Flyers. I don't see it going anywhere. Whatever else is out there, the buffalo that used to roam on there that are still in the caged area, et cetera, et cetera. So if we can have somebody give us a little bit of money, I'd even go for 20-year. Simple fact, it's there. We don't want the land. I'm sorry, but we probably will never use this land. So why wouldn't we commit to it? And from an administrator's point of view, it might be something for us to look at, because there are certain sections of the rest of the city in different areas, not in the city, but these outlying areas that we have absolutely no use for this land. If they're going to commit to putting a building there, it's going to be more than 5 and 10 years. It's a 30, 40-year building. They're committed. Why don't we? I think I would go for a 20-year if you're going to change a motion. At least 10 for sure. So, thanks.
Just members' information, I think under the SAYS Act, we can only go 10 years. That's a maximum we can go, so if you, for another council to decide that. But other speakers, Council Bryce?
Thank you. I feel slightly different about this. First of all, in the lease, as was mentioned, this may be a dirty sport. What about the environment? What kind of harm is it doing there? And do we have something in the lease that says when this lease is over, they need to remediate I can't even say it, to get rid of the environmental toxins in the land before they leave? Do we have something like that in the lease?
Through your worship, I'll defer the details of the lease to Mr. Barr.
Mr. Barr.
Through your worship, our leases typically would require the land be returned to the state in which it was originally occupied in, so that's a typical condition of the lease.
So do we have somewhere documented what this land was like over 45 years ago, so that when this lease does end, we know what it's supposed to be like?
Mr. Barr?
Through your worship, wouldn't quite, I'm not sure that we would document it, but we certainly would be aware of what was in the land and what the potential causes were of the land. So through environmental engineering, we'd be able to determine what's in the land and what the source of that was.
Thank you for that. So do we ask for a financial plan or what their budgets are like each year before we give them a heck of a deal like this? Because if they're looking at putting up a tower and more concessions, you wouldn't do that unless you're actually making money. So do we ask for that? I don't know who to ask.
Ms. Horlock?
Your worship, I do not believe we do. This is a not-for-profit organization, so at this point, that's how they're operating.
So it's been mentioned that some of council feels like we'll never ever use this land. So if we feel that we're never ever going to use this land, it's got value in the land. Why aren't we just selling it instead of charging $1,000 a year for this?
Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, we have a number of land holdings in the city and outside of the city, and we'll be looking at a longer-term land disposition policy that we'll bring to council. So our golf courses are nearby, so there is reasons why we have these lands. It's that we actually own quite a few acres of land around this. So at this point in time, we haven't done the full analysis of whether or not this is a land that we should dispose of at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. I feel that we need to stick with the 5 years. We don't know what's around the corner, and if there's issues with the golf course and we do need this land, I think 5 years to 5 years, as I said, it's a heck of a deal of $1,000 a year. So I think with me, I go the opposite way than you. I feel that 5 years is enough for right now, and it's been 40-some years already. So.
Thank you, Councilor Price. Other speakers to the report? Councilor Burnett.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a little clarification, if I could, in terms of this policy around land disposition, because I'm kind of teetering here that I understand from the volunteer perspective, the longer term of the lease allows them to do much better long-term planning and making decisions on their capital investment. Yet on the other hand, if we're, let's say, 5 years out or 7 years out that we're going to be looking at disposing of some of these lands or changes, that kind of may affect my decision. But I'm right now kind of hedging going on a longer lease to 10 years. But I am curious, is there anything else besides our plan to look at a land disposition policy? Is there anything from the provincial RMS Sherwood that is on the radar screen that might be going through that area, or if that land might be needed for something else?
Ms. Hardlock?
Through your worship, we don't have anything right now on the books in terms of needs for this land at this point in time. So at this point, I think it's work that we'll need to do to look at what our long-term goals are for this land in the next few years.
Just one additional question. From your perspective, given a 10-year lease, would that sort of accommodate a time frame that you would be comfortable with if you did the new land disposition policy and maybe other items that may come along?
Ms. Horlock?
Through your worship, I think either the 5 or the 10 is doable within the 5 years. I think that would give us time to look at some of our lands and give them an answer sooner rather than later. I know at Finance and that was one of the discussions, was that it would be brought back and then there'd be another opportunity to renew the lease again. So at this point, administration is comfortable with either the 5-year or the 10-year. We had recommended the 10-year.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Other speakers? Councillor Donald.
First, I'm going to seek some clarity, Your Worship. I'm wondering why the committee went back on 5 years compared to the 10-year recommendation from staff.
Councillor Murray, you want to?
Thanks, Your Worship. There was some discussion, much like what we've had here around the table, and the idea of the long-term viability and should we do it, what should we do, should we tie the hands of this council for another 10 years? And it came down to 3 years and then came back up to 5 years. So one of our council colleagues had asked, he's not here this evening, so he can't speak to it, but he had asked that we review this on a more timely matter as opposed to going to 10 years. And that's where 3 years was brought forward and 5 years was finally approved. And that's how we got here.
Thanks very much. If I could also seek some clarity from staff as to this area. First of all, is this land within the boundary of the City of Regina? Or is this land that we own in the RM of Sherwood that's ours?
It's in the RM of Sherwood.
Through your worship, it is in the RM of Sherwood.
Thanks very much. So in this area, loosely called Kings Park, we have, if I'm not mistaken, golf courses. We have this track. We have cross-country skiing that occurs out there. Am I missing anything? Motocross. Am I missing anything?
Ms. Horlock?
Not that I am aware of.
The Windy Flyers is just adjacent to them as well.
So there's a concrete pad there or something that they can use, right? Can somebody tell me approximately how many acres this entire thing is?
Ms. Horlock?
Approximately.
To you, the land in question is 46 acres.
So that 46 meaning Kings Park Speedway and the golf courses? And
no.
No?
Sorry, I'm not. I'll defer to Mr. Barb.
So Kings Park Speedway is 46 acres?
That's the area for the lease,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
Through your worship, we have lots of land out there. I'm not sure of the exact amount, but in addition to the 2 golf courses, the police have their SWAT practice area out there. We have the motocross racing. We have the Windy Flyers. This racing as well. So it's a couple of sections, I believe, of land that we have there. And there's some land that's not utilized as well. It is very low land and close to the aquifer, so some of it is sensitive and not able to be used.
Okay, thanks for that. So as the discussion was going on, I recalled at a time, sometime in my youth, going out there for a winter carnival. The place used to open up, and we did a lot of things in the wintertime with them. So all I heard repeatedly was the notion of recreation. Now, we have a mandate that we want to make sure that people have a place to go and a place to recreate. Now, I've yet to hear, never heard in my lifetime, anybody talk about any other kind of development for this area. But I certainly have heard of people who truck out there to do a whole list of things. So perhaps the investment that we give is that we're going to give time, and a considerable amount of time, for the people who live in Regina and surrounding area for a place to go recreate. And by the way, it seems that it's done in a variety of fashions. And from what I can tell, although I don't believe they drive cars in the wintertime, it is a year-round place. And I think maybe we need to protect that. So if someone would come forward with a 10-year, I'll stand here and support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers? If there are no other speakers, I'm going to give this to Councillor Murray to close debate.
Thanks very much, Your Worship. I'm just going to go back to Councillor Flegel. had made a comment about racing cars. And in fact, I actually took the wheel of a 74 Nova in a mechanics race, on a stock car race, about 6 years ago. 7 years ago. Sorry, it was during my first term. My math on that. Long time ago. The smell of rubber and the hydrocarbons coming up off that engine, it was intoxicating. Okay, I understand why they do what they do. I understand the camaraderie of what's going on there, and I understand these people are committed to this. Councillor Donald, you're right. This is a community of people who are engaged in something they absolutely love, and it's a sport. At the end of the day, this is land that we've just heard does not have a huge amount of value to us long term. It's something that's on our books like many other pieces of land. It's something we don't have to take care of. These folks pay the taxes to the RM of Sherwood so that they can take care of the road for them. This is a pretty simple one for us. There's no big cost involved in it, but it's a great piece for our community and for our community at large around us. I believe that giving these folks a 10-year lease would give them the ability to go back to their sponsors, go back to their investors, go back to those people who are willing to invest their time and their effort, their blood, sweat, and tears into this community piece. I think it's critically important that we have it, and I'd like to move, Your Worship, if I can have a seconder, that we adjust the lease to a 10-year lease.
Okay, that's a motion. Councillor Flanagan moves that. Okay,
that would be my motion, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Speakers to the amendment. I think we've all talked about that a lot. If there's anything addition to be said to this? We're clear on the motion is now to change from a 5 to a 10-year lease on the report. I'll call the question on those. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Thank you.
Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Well, I'll move on to next delegation.
We need to do the actual motion.
Oh, sorry. The motion, the report as amended.
And, Your Worship, I have nothing else to say based on this. I appreciate very much the commitment of council to it. I understand that not everyone agrees with 10 years, but I really appreciate the committee come together. Thanks, Your Worship.
Okay. On the report as amended, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now we'll go on to our next delegation. Dan Marinovic, if you could come forward, please. State your name for the record, who you represent. And you have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Thank you, Your Worship. My name is Dan Marinovic, and I'm the Senior Vice President with Western Canada Land and Housing at DREAM. I'm grateful for the opportunity today to speak with you in regards to our proposal to donate $650,000 to the City of Regina. DREAM is proud to help Regina kids keep cool on hot summer days with this donation to build the spray pad at the Northwest Leisure Centre. The donation will be used to advance the planned outdoor recreation park at the Leisure Centre. Specifically, it will allow for the completion of a new spray pad and associated features on the site. DREAM is pleased to donate to this project for a number of reasons, including the fact that the Northwest Leisure Centre is within a sector of the city in which DREAM has made several significant investment in both developing the existing neighborhoods over the last several decades and land for future neighborhoods. Also, we understand that this project is a high priority for the City of Regina. The administration has initiated community consultation regarding new outdoor amenities at the Leisure Centre, and since the project is in its infancy, the timing of the donation lines up just right with the construction schedule. At DREAM, our driving purpose is to build better communities. We feel that it's a privilege to be a part of the development sector in the city, and as such, feel that we have a responsibility to contribute to and invest in the communities where we work. This donation is important to us, specifically because we are grateful to help provide funding to allow the project to move forward in a timely manner, and we are very committed to the business we do in the City of Regina, both in new and fully developed areas. We are excited to take part in this project and to continue building better communities in the City of Regina. I'm available for your questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. The questions of the delegation. Councillor Donald.
Thanks very much. Thanks for coming. So let's talk a little bit about this in terms of where it is, why it is, and how it may affect an area close by that may be developed at some point in time. So I think I heard you say, one, that DREAM Home in the past was responsible for this neighborhood. Is that why you selected this location?
We selected this location because we understood there was a high priority for the City of Regina, and we wanted to make a contribution to an investment in a neighborhood which may come on in the future time.
Perfect. So we also talked about planning that this is fairly close, somewhat adjacent to the future Coopertown area. Do you see those people benefiting from this as well?
Absolutely. We think that the people in the Northwest will benefit from it, as well as all the residents of the City of Regina.
Good. You may have noted earlier in this council meeting or others you've attended that not every day do we have people come forward offering us money. So first of all, thank you. But I also want to make sure that I'm clear as to, so if you give the money, what would you like in return?
The only thing that we ask is for a tax receipt.
Okay.
It's good.
Thanks. Anyone else?
And perhaps some sort of naming recognition as well, but that's about it.
That's fair. I'm prepared to negotiate a little more here if you...
Not on the floor, Council. No, not so
Okay.
much.
That's good, thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Donald. Very generous. Thank you. Other questions of the delegation? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery when I'll
Thank you.
report
Thank you.
for us. Councilor Flagel?
Thank you. Rise in support of this CR 15-25, and it's the City Council approve the receipt of Dream Development's restricted donation of $650,000 for Northwest Leisure Center spray pad. Council approved the additional Northwest Leisure spray pad to Community Service Capital Planning Project for 2015 with restricted donation as the funding source. City Council delegated authority to Executive Director, City Services, and to Chief Financial Officer to negotiate and execute a donation agreement based upon principles outlined in the report. And I'd like
Seconder
if I
for
could get
that.
a seconder for that.
Seconder, Councilor Donald. Thank you.
This is a great news story for, and we hope more developers decide they want to, put their name up and do all kinds of things for the city of Regina, because they get a lot from the city. We contribute a lot, and everybody contributes to make the city better. This is one way that Dream, through its various names throughout the last 50 years, comes back to they've put a lot of houses in this city, and now it's time that they've decided it's time to put back some, and we appreciate it very much. It's been great. The Northwest, there's 4 councillors of us, Councillor myself, this is Councillor Hinks' territory, who would probably speak at this tonight if he was here, but Councillor Bryce and Councillor O'Donnell, we all sort of envelop the whole Northwest corner, and anytime something like this goes on, we're all involved. There's all kinds of things that go on. This is maybe something that's going to take us further to go west, eventually when further development takes place, but for right now, the people of the Northwest, and I'll just say from Pasqua Street, from the railroad tracks south or north, First Avenue North, going north all the way, this is going to be a great project for them because it's going to allow them to all come up to this area and utilize it. And the rest of the city is welcome to use it as well. I'm not saying that it's just for the Northwest. What it does is we've got this land. We were cutting the grass. Now, the grass, there won't be grass. It'll get watered by the kids, and they'll have a blast. So next summer, by the end of this next summer, I think is when it's going to be. This will be a great idea. It's a great idea by Dreams and by our staff who all worked on it. My only question is, if and when this goes through, when does it start?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Your Worship. The project would start within probably the next 2 months with a completion date of this fall, later in October, and the grand opening would be in the spring of 2016.
Perfect. It takes about a year, a little bit more. So appreciate that. I'm in full support of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel. Other speakers to it? Councilor Donald?
Thanks, Your Worship. I have a few questions. One, do we have any other spray pads in the city of Regina?
Mr. Onright?
Through you, Your Worship, yes, we do.
Could you tell me the locations?
Right.
It's a test question.
We do. We're developing a similar spray pad to the one on the north, proposed for the Northwest at the Southeast Leisure Center. The spray pads in the Northwest are smaller, so single spray pads, not multiple spray pads, as this development would be.
Good. So does this donation, this generous donation, pay for the entire cost of this project?
Mr. Onright?
Through Your Worship, yes, it does.
Good. So if this one goes in, do we then have I'll call it a significant spray pad in the north, in the east, in the south, and so on, so that our city is served?
Mr. Onright?
That's correct.
Good, thanks very much. So I'll just make a comment if I could. A number of years ago, we had a recreational study, and this is one of those priorities in there, and we as a council have not been able to do all of the things I think that we wish to do over the period of time. I think this is extremely generous of Dream to put this forward so that it is a complete project on one donation. We don't talk about matching funds. We don't talk about partnerships. we just simply have a gift to us that is kind. I think the notion of putting a little bit of signage up there for them would be great. But maybe I should also ask so that we understand a little bit more about tax receipt and so on. Is this the first time we've done this? And if I could, also, how does this work?
Mr. Onrait?
Through you, Your Worship. No, this is not the first time we've done this. The way this works is the $650,000 less the recognition. So if the recognition was deemed to be $75,000, the tax receipt would be net of that recognition dollars.
Okay, and so I think the answer, or the question I'm kind of looking for is, so is this a given that they'll get a tax receipt? Is this an application process? Is this a program that the federal government wants us to gift these types of things? I just want to understand that part.
Mr. Onrait?
Through Your Worship, yes, through Canada Revenue Agency, that the rules of how the donation is dealt with, we will follow those rules, and also through our donation policy within the city, we have rules around that also.
Okay, so this is consistent and this has happened. Okay, perfect. I'm happy. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Other speakers? Councilor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to clarify for myself, the donor recognition package is part of that whole amount that DREAM will be contributing to the city, or does the city pay for the donor recognition package?
Mr. Onrait?
Through Your Worship, no, that is a part of the $650,000.
It's part of the 650.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Young. Councilor Fundura?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question on the maintenance of the spray pad. For yearly repairs or yearly maintenance, do you know what the cost would be for that? Do we have any idea from other areas?
Mr. Onrait?
Through you, Your Worship, the maintenance cost has been estimated to be $7,000 a year, and that has been calculated through the cost through the other major spray pads that we have.
Okay, and then for the costs coming from where, Your Worship?
Mr. Onrait?
That is from facilities, and that includes the price of the water, cost of the water also.
Okay, do we have a fund set aside for unexpected maintenance issues that might arise, Your Worship?
Mr. Onrait?
Through Your Worship, not at this time. The $7,000 is an average.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, other comments? I'd make one just to thank Mr. Mrnovich and DREAM for their investment. This is a great corporate citizen giving back to the community. They've helped build our city, and they're giving back, and it's a great model to be doing so. Thank you very much for that. Councilor Flego to close debate.
Thanks. Just a quick question. The design of this is going to be a standard design. Have we got something new and wild and crazy coming out in this next month or two? Or, because everybody's going to ask, like, oh, what's it going to look like? What's it going to be? So I'm going to ask that right now because I'm excited about this.
Mr. Onrait, do you have a wild and crazy design there?
I'm not sure if it's wild and crazy, but it will be similar to the southeast design.
Okay.
However, through consultation with the community groups, that's what will help formulate the final design.
Okay, thank you. And I made a comment at Planning Commission, I think I'll leave it alone for now, but it was a...
Good. I'll call the question on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll continue with the delegations. Judith Verasuk. You could identify yourself and who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Good evening, Mayor Fougere and City Council. How do I follow a $650,000 donation? Well, I'm going to try. Thank you for this opportunity to come and address you today on behalf of the Regina Downtown Business Improvement District. We are here as a proud partner in the Regina Downtown Neighborhood Plan, In 2009, we have worked closely with City administration on the many initiatives identified in the plan. We have also collaborated with administration and the greater Regina community on projects that support the plan's vision for downtown Regina. The resulting changes we see downtown, both the improvements and the challenges, can be attributed to the community's collective desire for a downtown that we can all be proud of. The report before you summarizes the initiatives that have been made by both public and private sector to improve and support our downtown, the heart of our city, and I would like to comment on a few of these initiatives. N1, devise a downtown waste management strategy. The status of this initiative states future. However, I would like to respectfully request that this initiative be addressed soon, particularly with respect to recycling. With the growth in our summer programming in the City Square Plaza, the farmers markets, the night markets, and the food truck program, there is now an acute need for recycling receptacles in the plaza and in Victoria Park. B5, create a facade renewal and improvement incentives program. RDBID is committed to working with City administration on moving this project forward. The development of a facade improvement program would support our recent designation as a Main Street Saskatchewan affiliate community. It is our hope that priority be placed on this project in the coming year. C2.1, complete the City Square pavilions. RDBID, with the support of City administration, has engaged an architect to redesign the West Pavilion. This design project will be completed by June 2015. Having access to an on-site pavilion will allow RDBID to enhance and expand our summer programming, as well as support additional programming in the fall and winter. As such, we look forward to working with the City to identify additional funding sources to support the construction of the pavilion. RDBID strongly urges that priority continue to be placed on this initiative. C6, create a signage and wayfinding strategy. The Visual Identity Project was initiated as a joint project between RDBID and the City of Regina in 2014. We are pleased to report that this project is nearing completion. We hope to have the project or the report ready for your consideration in the coming months. A key deliverable of this project is the design of new wayfinding signage. Upon approval by the City of Regina, RDBID is prepared to develop and install prototype signs this year, with the hope of additional installations in 2016. We will be working closely with the City on the design, installation, deployment, and funding strategies for this most important project. T3, refocus transportation planning on pedestrians. I've made mention in the past of the needed investment in our sidewalk infrastructure. Many of our sidewalks downtown are failing. They're broken, cracked, missing paver stones. We do our best to report these deficiencies in a timely manner. However, the response time needs to be improved. For instance, we had a broken sidewalk with missing paver stones on the south side of the 2100 block of 11th Avenue. This is our busiest pedestrian area, not to mention that the broken area was right in front of a bus stop. Our request for repair took over 4 months to be addressed and actually is still really not finished. This is unacceptable on the busiest street of our downtown. Continued and timely repair of our downtown sidewalks is critical and must remain an important priority across all city departments. T5, prioritize and enable the efficient operation of public transit. Over the past 2 years, RDBID has worked closely with the businesses and with Transit Regina to develop solutions for transit operations through downtown. We are pleased to see the installation of the 4 heated and lit bus shelters along 11th Avenue and hope that similar investments will continue throughout downtown. While not itemized in the RDNP report, RDBID would like to again state the need for a permanent transit terminal. A permanent terminal with indoor waiting facilities, public restrooms, ticket sales, and ancillary retail like a coffee or newspaper stand would further enhance transit as a viable commuting option.
Ms. Verzek, you have 30 seconds.
We would welcome the opportunity to work with the City on this project in the future. In closing, RDBID respectfully requests the priority and resources be directed to the continued implementation of the RDNP. It's important to acknowledge that many of our initiatives would not have been possible without the support of the City of Regina. And just think of how amazing all our projects will be when we have completed the implementation of this plan. Thank you for your time, consideration, and continued support of downtown and RDBID, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Right on time. Thank you very much. Are there questions of Delegate Councilor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. Judith, thank you for such a great report. I have information now that I didn't have before about what BID is doing and what it hopes to do in the future. One thing you mentioned is that you've been accepted as a Main Street project. Could you talk just a little bit about what that means?
Through you to the chair. Back in, I believe it was August of 2014, RDBID applied to the Ministry of Tourism, Sport and Culture with the province to be a part of the Main Street Saskatchewan program. There are 2 tiers, one being an accredited tier, which has all the bells and whistles of that program, and the second tier being the affiliate tier. I was before you in September looking for support and a letter of support for that application, and I'm pleased to report that we have been accepted as an affiliate tier. This will allow us to access additional resources and information from the ministry in support of the historic preservation of our downtown, as well as different initiatives such as promotions and economic development. So we're looking forward to working with the province on enhancing our Main Street Regina opportunity.
And then the other question that I have is you mentioned a terminal for buses, and you mentioned restrooms and coffee shops and as such. What downtown restrooms do we have available now that aren't part of a business?
Right now, well, technically none. When we host our events in the park, the Cinema Under the Stars, for instance, we direct people to the library. And the problem that we're running into is that we're now hosting over 2,000 people at our movies. And I can tell you that those restrooms probably aren't enough for that volume of attendance. We do rent restrooms, porta-johns for our events, but there are a lot of times that my staff who are out on the streets during the day, they're asking for the directions to restrooms, and typically if the mall's open, that's where we point them to.
So that's a real need now, not just in the future.
Correct.
Are there any plans or any ideas for how that might be accomplished other than a bus terminal?
I think we would have to have those discussions. You can design anything these days, and if you can design a bus terminal with access outside of bus terminal operation hours to have that the restroom facilities available. That being said, I've been in Victoria. I'm sure most of you have been there at some point in time. They've implemented standalone public restrooms within their entertainment corridor. It's a simple one stall and then one urinal stall. And it takes up, I would say it's no more than 20 square feet in a wider sidewalk. And it doesn't have to be a huge building. We can look at something like that, which would be affordable if we are serious about installing public restrooms in downtown.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Young. Councilor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Thanks a lot for your presentation. There's just so much good work being done downtown, and I think RBID is really such a key piece of that. Now, your organization is financed by a local tax. Is that right?
Through you to the chair, we are financed by a levy that is imposed on the commercial properties within the downtown bid boundaries. So it's when the property owner gets their tax bill, it'll say property tax,
Sure.
the library tax, and then there's a bid levy.
Okay, so some of these very important, I would like to add in worthwhile, things are mentioned about recycling downtown, about sidewalk repair, that sort of thing. Are you governed by pretty strict guidelines about what your budget can pay for that? Like, could you pay for some capital pieces downtown, or do you pay for some capital pieces downtown through that levy?
The bylaw itself doesn't have anything that stipulates we can't.
Sure.
It does say we cannot own property.
Okay. So do you see some of these projects you're mentioning as, fully on the shoulders of the city, or potentially, do you guys have funds that could help with some of those issues, the signage, the recycling, that sort of thing?
I think, we do have a reserve. We have a capital reserve for capital projects such as these, and I would be happy to work with the administration in terms of what the cost-sharing agreement could be.
Okay. Okay, great. Just finally say, yeah, thanks so much for your work. The Regina's downtown has just really changed so much over the last few years, and I think your organization's been really a key part of that, so thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Judith, for the presentation tonight. I'm trying to feel how I can word this question without having a very long answer. That maybe it would be worthwhile sharing for council just sort of who's represented on the downtown bid board and how this list comes to be and gets prioritized, and how you sort of feed this information into the city.
Sure. Through you to the chair, very quickly. Our board is made up primarily of downtown property owners and business owners. We strive to have representation from all aspects. So we do have a hotelier, we have property management, we have a small business owner, and through their position on the board, they provide insight as to how our initiatives can help their business and in turn help downtown.
So would you describe your organization kind of being kind of on the ground, sort of eyes and ears of picking up the best reconnaissance and being able to feed it back into our own planning processes?
Sure. We do have, hopefully I'm answering this correctly, we do have summer staff as well as our staff that are constantly out on the street talking to folks, talking to people who come downtown, use downtown, work downtown, own businesses downtown. And it's actually timely that you're asking this question because we are embarking on a strategic plan process for the next 3 years. And that is going to entail a huge public engagement strategy where we are going to formally be reaching out to these folks to get their views on what downtown could be in the future. And through that interaction, that will help direct our board in terms of what projects and initiatives will become priorities for us in the coming years.
Thank you. No, I think you answered the question very well. I just wanted to recognize not only the downtown bid, but the warehouse business improvement district, because I think the makeup of the board really brings together the collection of everybody that wants to live, work, invest, shop downtown, and brings all those interests into a centralized spot, and probably provides a lot of good planning advice and assistance in helping us when we formulate the broader plan. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Other questions of the delegation? I have one, and thank you very much for a very good report. Lots of progress being made. We have a list of several projects here. Are these in order of priority or just all at the same equal level of urgency and importance?
These are in the order of which you would see them in the report that was
Okay.
presented to you. So they're not in priority. I just went through the report and kind of took it in order.
So if I might, from your perspective, which are the most important ones for you, for your organization?
The pavilions.
Pavilions number one.
Yes. The pavilions and the sidewalks.
That's good. Thank you
We
very
need
much.
to talk to Dream. Yeah.
I think they're gone.
Yeah, I know. I'll have to catch him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, answering questions. You can return to the gallery, and we'll now consider the report. This is the Planning Commission, the Downtown Neighborhood Plan Improvement Implementation Update. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you. So I'm just going to repeat what you just said. It is the 2014 Regina Downtown Neighborhood Plan Implementation Update. And this is a report that is listed as a receive and file. We at the Planning Commission thought it would be worthwhile to come before council so that you had the information.
So we'll get a seconder for that, if I could?
If I could have a
Just before
seconder.
you get into it, Councilor Burnett. Go ahead.
Thanks. So I'm very pleased that Ms. Verisek would come. We had an engaging conversation on planning, and I think you had an engaging one here. I think one of the comments I would make, and I'm going to make very few, is that we had a very large public engagement process to get to this downtown plan. I would suggest to you that one of the things that's happening is that it's working. That's one. And two, that there continues to be a cooperation among the businesses and the bid and the city to make sure that things get done, albeit acknowledging there are some problems. I'm going to deviate just slightly because we were talking about washrooms. I've seen these portable washrooms. I want you to understand that they are the neatest thing. They can even be such that they are operational to 40 below, and that if someone wanted to linger too long in the washroom, actually they have timers on some of them that just flush the whole place out, probably including anybody that stays in too long. So it is one of those neat things. So
there's an obvious question to be asked here.
I understand.
I'm just saying.
I think it was a safety issue I was trying to get at. But it tweaks a memory, and it tweaks the conversation. Now, this might be one of those things where because of, and in our report, it says to 700,000 people taking part in all of the activities down there. This might be one of those things that we can get some donations toward with signage and so on there that would make our downtown even better. So this is a receive and file. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor John. Councilor Young?
Well, I raised my eyebrows, so now I have a chance to speak. I don't know if it's well, yes, I can phrase a question here. Is there any way that we could include bathrooms in the downtown area in present planning or planning in the near future? I think when you have that many people using an area, that should be a priority to fit in somewhere in that planning process.
Ms. Harlock?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's something that I think we can take back as a question for administration to look at when we're looking at the downtown plans that are coming forward.
Thank you.
Other speakers to the report? Councilor Fraser, could you just take this seat just for a second, please? I want to just start by thanking Ms. Verisuk for coming in and reporting back on the progress being made on what is really a very important report for our city, Downtown Neighborhood Plan. And members will recall in previous councils, the number one priority focus was the downtown, as the heart and soul of our city. And in many ways, I think Councilor Fraser just mentioned this, there's been some huge strides being made for downtown. Not the least of which is of course, the plaza, which was the initial process of showing the public sector commitment to downtown. And therefore, we've seen some major changes where the private sector accepts, of course, some of the changes that we've made for our towers to now we have more festivals, we have restaurants, and a host of other activities happening here. We work in partnership with the downtown bid to be our eyes and ears and give us advice on what we should be doing next. And I think Ms. Verisuk's comments about what she needs, I asked her what those priorities would be. I think are pretty clear what those are. So I know the administration is working very closely with the downtown bid to see that they go forward on there. So I want to thank the administration for that partnership. I think it works very well. There are challenges, no question. There's always issues of growth. I'd much rather have this kind of problem than having boarded up windows and people leaving. People are coming to downtown and investing in it. It's really good news. But I do have a question of some detail on the presentation from Ms. Verisuk, and that relates to the sidewalks and the bricks and the repair of that. And I just was wondering, do we have a strategy to deal with that? Is it just as we can, or I know in 11th Avenue it is the most highly greatest traffic area of the downtown. For safety issues, aesthetics, do we and will we look at those areas that are needing of some tender love and care?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Minister, Deputy Mayor. The process is on the worst first basis, in that we are addressing those areas in the worst condition first. There is a limited budget to address that, and so we get to as much as we can on a yearly basis.
I appreciate that. That's good to know that these are not forgotten, and it doesn't seem that they are. So it is receive and file, but it's a great opportunity to once again talk about how great our downtown is and how we're making tremendous strides for making it a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week downtown. Thank you. Other speakers? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Next report is the City Manager's report on the proposed cost-sharing agreement with the bypass project. If I could have a mover for that, please.
I'll move the recommended disposition of the City Manager's report.
And a seconder for that, please. Councilor Flagel. Are there speakers on this report? If I could ask, okay, I'll speak after you then. Councilor Fraser.
Okay, thank you through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just a couple thoughts. This talks about the cost sharing of a couple bypasses. It's of note that the amount we would pay for either bypass is of varying degrees. Certainly the 9th Avenue North bypass, it seems that's something that we need for our growth plan. I've been kind of on the fence with the Hill Avenue bypass, given that it's so far out of town right now, but also to note that the cost sharing, our portion of that is only about 16%. So I think ultimately that the city will need that bypass at some point. There's an argument to be made that we should, paying for that now when it's only cost us 16% of the whole project makes it worth our while. So just one quick question here. As far as, like, supposing there is a cost overrun with this project, are we sort of protected? Would we be on the hook if the cost is more than we think it might be? Is that a city's issue, or given that this is the province's project, would it be theirs?
Mr. Davies?
Mr. Mayor, through you, at the present time, the province is seeking to have our costs escalate if the costs of the project go up. That would be part of our negotiations, however, that to seek to minimize the exposure for the city's costs. Observing, however, that this is a P3 project, and the likelihood is the costs, if anything, will come in less than the current estimates. But to your point, Councillor, our negotiating position will be to limit the city's exposure, albeit that the province is looking for us to escalate.
Sure. Just of note that this is a very, very big project, $1.2 billion. So a cost overrun, a small cost overrun is a big cost overrun, actually. So just in our negotiations, if we can keep that in mind, the less liability the city can have, the better. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Fraser. No other speakers? Councillor Fraser, I'm going to ask you to take my seat again for a moment. So the report before us is actually asking for the authority for the city manager or his designate to finalize negotiations on the interchanges on the west side of what will be the bypass around the city. So before I get to that comment, I'll make a general comment about the state of negotiations and also about the bypass. I want to reiterate that the City of Regina's absolute commitment to this project. And there's been some discussion around the piece that we were wavering that the city was not supporting. We absolutely support this, and this council on record, and previous council on record, is absolutely supporting this project. But what we want to talk about, of course, is the interchange on the west side of the city, which is the subject of this report. Not the project itself, we support that. It's what is the cost-sharing arrangement that the city, the Arm of Sherwood, and the province has on 9th Avenue North and Hill Avenue. That's the essence of this report. That's subject to negotiation. This report tonight gives us a status as of today, but the report in negotiations is not finalized. Thus the reason to allow the authority to the city manager to conclude those. And we're going to break some new ground here because, frankly, the idea of a municipality being involved in a bypass or an interchange doesn't typically happen. But in this case, there are two entry points onto the bypass that the city street will be connected to. So it's a local street, a municipal street. And that is part of how we get into the mix of this. I think we all would want to have this paid for by the province completely because, frankly, this is a provincial project. It's not a city project. But that was not the case. We were being asked to make a contribution to it. And most imminently, the 9th Avenue North one is very close geographically to the city. And therefore, our interest, as you'll see in this, is much more substantial, but still reasonable. The jurisdiction of where the city line ends for maintenance and where the province is pretty clear what that's going to be. But the one that is not quite as clear is, of course, Hill Avenue. And if you look on the map in the report, that is some distance away from the city today. It's in our plans in the future, but it's not there today. So part of the negotiation is what is the city interest in that? How do we define that? Because people who will be using that interchange and going into the city will come into the city from other parts of the province. So there is a number, and I think we should not debate what that is tonight, but ask the administration to do that. I know they'll look after our interests and the interests of taxpayers, and we'll see that report come back in the near future. But I support the report. It's important that we have this discussion, that we set some rules and regulations and guidelines as to what we'll make a contribution on. But in the big picture, this is about growth of not just Regina, but southern Saskatchewan. We've had planning summits, we've had regional summits, we've had housing summits to talk about how we talk and deal with our partners, the Armor Sherwood, other communities around Regina who will benefit from this one. We're not an island unto ourselves, and we have to be involved in providing support for our neighbors. What's that number? We'll leave it to the wisdom of the administration in the negotiations with the province to come back with what I think will be a fairly good number. This project will start whether we're negotiating or not. The tenders for this, I understand, go up this year. They want this whole bypass completed. I believe it's by 2017, 2019, around that area. So this is a very quick project. It's a $1.3 billion project. So we have to get on board. We must get on board and protect our interests and not be told what it will be. Let's do it by negotiation so we protect our interests. So I'd ask members of council to support the report. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Fraser. Councillor Bryce?
Thank you. This is a provincial project. It's not a city project. We don't have it on our list of infrastructure needs. We have enough infrastructure needs here in the city without going outside the city to have our needs met for the future. By the time we need some of these bypasses, or not bypasses, but interchanges, they're probably going to need to be redone again anyways. So I'm not in favor of this. I think this is a provincial project, and that's the money that should be going into it, not our city infrastructure money.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other speakers? Councillor Donnell?
Thanks. So I want to invite you to come to West Regina sometime. Oftentimes what I hear is about the east and where it's going to go, but I want to invite you to come to the west, and I'm going to describe a few things for you. The first thing is I would like you to come to Dudney Avenue and Pinkie Road about, I really don't care what time of day, but daytime hours, and see bumper-to-bumper traffic that is trying to avoid some of the other congestion in the city. And as the afternoon progresses, it continues to be bumper from all the way up to 9th Avenue North on a road, Pinkie Road, that is not good for lots of traffic, but also not safe for any truck traffic because there's a small wooden bridge there. Second part of it is that I want you to understand about the amount of truck traffic that currently goes up and down Dudney Avenue. There isn't a day goes by that either the mayor or the local councillor doesn't hear about this. And so they're looking for some relief, not only from their street, but also so that that truck traffic can work differently. That is to go north, to go east, to go west, and to go south. Now, one of the things I recall from a presentation from the GTH is that, and this is, I think, one of the evidence for the bypass, is that those trucks are not going to be single trailer, and they're not going to be double trailer, but the idea is to go to triple trailers. And so if you look again to the west side of the city, you will see that there's already an interchange at Highway 1. There's an interchange over the CP main line that is under construction, fairly advanced. And that will allow those trucks to go through in a safe fashion. I'm not excited about the notion of contributing to a provincial project as has been stated. But I am looking ahead to the fact that in our area of the city, we're going to have extreme growth. Coopertown was projected to be over 30,000 people. West Terre is going to have 7,000 to 8,000 people. And I can go down the line, there are a number. So this is pretty much at the point whereby we need some relief. My concern in this, and my 2 cents in the notion of negotiating is, it's what happens after. It is that urban connector notion. It is funding for maintenance and so on that is paramount in my mind. And so I have talked to the Minister of Highways, and I will be talking to her again because that is very important for this. But we need some relief on the west side.
Thank you, Councilor O'Donnell. Councilor Murray.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm kind of torn because I agree that I don't think we should be responsible for something that is really a provincial project. But on the same token, I'm also torn on the other side with following Councilor O'Donnell and his thought patterns, because I do, as the ward councillor for the North Central component of what you're referring to, Councilor O'Donnell, I do get a lot of calls. Truck traffic on 4th Avenue, on Dudney. Dudney is not designed for that big truck traffic, and it does tear up and wreak havoc with those roads. But even when it go back a long ways back, 3rd Avenue is actually a boulevard, and it was better designed for larger traffic, albeit when the Louvain came along in the early 80s, and now we're going back in time here a little bit, a lot of stuff got shifted and changed, and there wasn't really maybe as good a strategic plan as we could have had at that time. And maybe there wasn't the forethought that one day we're going to need these things to interconnect. One day there could be something out there. What we do know is that growing to the east side of Regina is problematic. Trying to move effluent from that side of the city across doesn't work very well. It's costly to be able to upgrade and do that. It's much more expensive than it is to move west. So it tells me that we will move west. And maybe sooner than the 25 years from now we've got to replace that interchange or repave it. Maybe it could be in the next 15 or 20 years, or really it could be in the next 10 years. So I see the investment going in that direction, that it is an investment in our future. It's an investment in our community's future, and it's an investment for my children's children and your children's children. This is not going to be maybe beneficial to me right now, but it will be to our city in the future. So I think as the fathers and mothers of this city that we need to make decisions that are based on what's in the best interest of the city into the future as well as today. So I think I'm going to be in favor, but I reserve that decision until the moment you ask it, Your Worship. Thank you.
And that's coming relatively soon, Councilor Murray.
So you won't have to
Councilor Flagel.
Thanks. I agree with Councilor O'Donnell. I mean, we're starting to see a bottleneck up in the north end. There's lots of things, and I mean, we're spending money on a stadium that we're looking into the 30, 40, 50, 70-year future. This won't be that long. Hill Avenue is going to take a long time. 9th Avenue, not a chance. That's coming in the next shorter version. The north is really growing. I mean, we've got potential down the road for Coopertown. We have all the different areas, the Maple Ridges, the new area of Skywood is coming. Hawkstone is still developing. I mean, we didn't open Rochdale to Albert. That's a bottleneck that we should have had. So this is an opportunity for us to release some of the pressure off of the Northwest to get us out of the city, get these big trucks on the proper roads, because I guess that's part of my ask is that with all the diverted traffic down Dudney Avenue, it's going to need to be redone. And was that part of the discussions and the plans that we're going to, get it all fixed back to what it used to look like, and they're going to pay for the bill? Or is there any way the province is going to pay for part of Dudney's rehabilitation after all this truck traffic that we've taken on for them is done, possibly?
Mr. Davies?
Mr. Mayor, initial response, and if more detail is wanted, I defer to Ms. Howrlock. In the broad context of negotiations, we're looking at the implications of some of the municipal infrastructure that's going to be required to support the interchanges. The specific reconstruction on Dudney has not been part of the discussion, but a broader consideration of costs associated with municipal costs is part of the negotiations on the table.
Good. That's important, because that's a huge project, because Dudney's getting just killed. So, but I agree. I mean, we've widened 9th Avenue North to 4 lanes up to Courtney, and eventually down the road we'll take it even further. And I just think it's a great idea that the city is finally realizing that the West is actually getting a lot bigger and will continue to grow on and on. West Terra is out there, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we need to put these interchanges, or at least commit to that particular thing as something for the future. So it's part of the plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel. Councilor Burnett.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question around kind of where the funds are coming from. Do we have any of the funds in a reserve now, or will we be borrowing this money?
Mr. Davies?
Mr. Mayor, through you, there will be a combination of factors need to be applied in terms of how to finance this, not the least of which will be SAFs. There will be attributions of some of the costs to future development in that part of the city.
Just one thought too, adding to this, or maybe the negotiation strategy. That I noticed the province in their recent budget looked at, because of low borrowing rates that the province can borrow for, they felt it was an opportune time to finance a lot of their infrastructure. Is there a possibility that if we have to borrow a portion of this in long term, that it can be tied into some of their low interest rates that are available, such as I believe some of it was through the wastewater?
Mr. Davies? You want your microphone on, perhaps?
Sorry? Mr. Mayor, through you, the short answer is yes. It is actually on the table as part of our discussions as well. There's been an overt offer of that being potentially part of the resolve to the overall question.
I guess from my perspective, I know I'm watching as we roll up our own debt limit, but I think in terms of what some of the councillors have been mentioning about the growth in the Northwest, that I think we have to look at opportunities with the city expanding, that maybe this is the time where we have to look at building for the future. But I'd certainly support more future negotiations to see if we can't bring it down as opposed to allowing it to go any higher. Thank you.
So Davies, in the report refers to 30 years that there would be a loan from the province. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's been part of the overt offer, that it would be a 30-year consideration, that it would be amortized over, and that the province would upfront the costs associated with that.
Okay. Councillor Young, you have some comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. In the report, it says that that the province has indicated it's going to be responsible for operations, maintenance, and rehabilitation of the bypass structures. Is that also on the table as part of the negotiating?
Mr. Davies?
Mr. Mayor, I would say that while the short answer is yes, the longer and more positive answer is that there is some conclusion on who will own the new structures, who will be responsible for the replacement of decks and bridge support work and so on. And the good news is that our negotiations thus far would have the province owning all of the new bridge work and ramp work, and have obligation for replacing that in the future.
Thank you.
That's good news. Great negotiations. Other speakers? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
Worship, I'll move a 5-minute recess or a 10-minute recess, if you're okay.
Only if you have a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. A 10-minute recess. We'll be back at just after 8 o'clock.
I just didn't want to be more blunt.
Yeah.
But I could think of it.
I was thinking about you, though. Okay. I just killed it.
There was a nice plastic holder.
On which part? On which one? Bypass? Oh, I know, so my mind is not active too far. I can.
They're asking.
What's that?
Some of us have to go to work yet.
Some have to go to Washington. I'd like to call the meeting to order, if I could, please. Okay, if I could get us back to order here, we have a community services report, CR 15-27. Councilor Flagel.
That would be me. Thank you very much. CR 15-27 is a recommendation of Community Protective Services for Grow Regina Gazebo. And it is another gift of sorts, not quite the monetary value, but art. Gazebo from Suramaski Arts Work Limited for placement in McLeod Park Community Gardens, which are operated by Grow Regina. If you're not familiar, for those of you that have been around a while, McLeod Park Community Gardens used to be the gardens that was on Broaden College, and there was a huge uproar in this room because we were moving it. Now they are happy. They love it there. They have got more artwork. It is like, it's becoming like a park. The lady in the audience didn't want to speak or didn't. She spoke at Community Protective, Yvette, and she was so happy that we were looking at it and designing, and they got this all put together. So that's one thing, that the Chief Operating Officer and his or her delegates be delegated the authority to negotiate and approve an agreement with Suramaski artwork for donation of the gazebo. So that's a pretty simple thing, I think, for our administration to do. So, and there's a few other things, but after we recommend concurrence with the whole thing, because it's another thing that establishes some beauty in the area. Thanks.
Seconder for that.
Second, your worship. Councilor Bryce?
Murray?
Oh, Councilor Murray.
That's good. Other speakers to the report? Councilor Young.
I'm just so pleased to see this coming to fruition. Councillor Hawkins and I met with Victor Sikansky, the artist, early on this project, and saw some of the pictures. And we have a renowned, internationally renowned artist designing this, and so I'm really pleased that it's now coming before council and that we will have a chance to support this. Thank you.
That's great. Councilor Fundura.
Just to comment, Your Worship, I'm pleased that See in the Garden is persons with disability or someone with mobility issues that have a chance to partake in that nice activity of gardening. So I commend the committee to doing that. Your Worship, thank you.
Thank you very much. Other speakers? Councilor Fraser?
Just briefly, thank you through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, really exciting. It's so nice. Public art is great, but when it's sort of functional public art, it can just be enjoyed by so many more people. And I would say if people haven't had a chance to see this gazebo, it's really on the scale, I think, of the Joe Fafard piece by the university, you know, the sort of metal Stonehenge piece. It's really going to be a great addition to our city, not only those for those who have a garden at the community garden, but for people beyond that too. So looking forward to supporting this motion.
Thank you for that. Other speakers? I'll just make a quick comment before Councilor Flake closes debate. I want to thank the administration as well for receiving this as well. I know this is public art. It is art being donated to the city, but done in good faith. The city has agreed to maintain it. This is very positive and a unique piece of art for our city, so it's outstanding. We very much support that. Councilor Flego, to close debate, if there's no one else that wants to speak.
Thank you. Just to go back on this a little bit, there was this, we had like I said, a huge delegation years ago, and then this got moved over. And so it slowly developed and developed and developed into the gardens of probably choice. And there's over 300 gardeners that take part in this every year. Some are right next door, some are around the corner, halfway around. The thing about this is there's no electricity out there, so we're not talking about lighting this thing up and doing things. It also meets all SEPTED regulations. Councilor Murray, I know you'd be happy with that. And that's a big thing because the community wants it to be a safe place that people will use. And in the summertime, obviously we get light till 9:30, 10 o'clock, so we don't really need the lighting there, and after that it's time. If they ever do need plug-ins, they can go, I think, to the church next door or down the road and get a plug-in if they need it for any little event or entertainment center. So recommend approval, and thanks again to everybody for bringing this all forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel. I'll call the question on a report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll move to Executive Committee. This is Development Southeast Lands. Councilor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I rise to bring forward report CR 15-28. This is the question of the city developing a parcel of land in the southeast and how we will proceed.
Seconder for that, please. Councilor Murray. Comments, questions, or others? You have the floor.
I'll get two chances to speak. Is that right?
You have opening and closing.
Okay. Okay, great. This is a really big question we have before us tonight. Certainly, we can imagine probably the big headline of tonight is some of this business with the stadium, but really there we're talking about $4 million. This project we're talking potentially about $60 million. So I really see this as a key conversation, not just for tonight, but really this whole term we have together as council. I plan to make a motion in my closing remarks. I had made a motion last at Executive Council talking about how this relates to the report that we had before us last fall recommending that the city start a publicly owned development corporation. So I'll just like to alert you folks that I plan to bring a motion forward in my closing remarks to that effect. I brought a similar motion forward at Exec Council that actually didn't get support. I also brought that forward as a referral motion. So certainly Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, it's at your discretion, but I would like to bring this motion forward under procedural bylaw section 20-8-A as a motion arising out of the matter included in the agenda for the council meeting at which is debated. That's at your discretion to decide if it's something we are able to debate or not.
We'll decide what the wording
Sure.
of the motion is,
Okay.
and with the clerk's advice, I'll make my determination.
Fair enough, and certainly that's at your discretion. So the report before us is talking about developing a parcel of land that the city bought a few years ago for around $7 million. The proposal suggests that we would hire a private manager to manage that development. That person would probably get paid around 5% of the whole development, but the city would take on the risk. That is to say, the city would put in close to $30 million in infrastructure to the project and expect to make back potentially around $60 million. This is some step in the right direction from how we have developed lands in the past, and I think it's certainly an opportunity. You know, we talked at this table about, you know, the need for infrastructure dollars and that sort of thing. So certainly this is money that, if we're able to make it, we'll put back into well-needed things for the city, and it's really a major alternative we have to, or one of the only major alternatives we have to just raising people's property tax. I mentioned last fall we had a motion before council report. This is from the September 10th meeting of Executive Council. It was EX-14-28, which was a motion from administration recommending that we create a publicly owned land development corporation. So something like our relationship with Real, that it's a standalone corp that we're the sole proprietor of. I really think this is, you know, an opportunity for the city. We haven't done this before, but lots of other cities have. Edmonton right now is in the process of creating one. We see examples in Winnipeg, in Saskatoon, in Calgary, and beyond, you know, of standalone corps that are able to develop the city's own land assets into, you know, into potentially a revenue stream for the city. On top of that, on top of being a revenue stream, you know, there's an argument that also there's an added level of transparency, the city handling its own land development through a third-party corporation. My big concern is that I think we should really try to finish that decision before we make this decision tonight. This is not a small decision. Also, we have a report that was referred back to administration last fall that is somewhere waiting. I'm not sure. Usually we refer a report has a date tied to it. Do we have a date tied to that report when it will come back to council? Anyone?
Ms. Orlock?
Through your worship, there was no date given within the report.
Okay.
Or within the motion.
Are we able to suggest a date or like a potential timeline of when that might come back?
Ms. Orlock?
Through you, your worship, that's something that council can deem for referral back to us. Right now, we've been focusing on the Southeast Lands Report. That's where our focus has been, and there's a multitude of different options for that report, and that's what we're looking into right now.
Okay, so I should say that not there's surely different valid opinions on whether the city should have a land corp. I just think, as far as due process goes, the order of operation is that we should make that decision first, and then talk about this really significant, you know, development. And it really, we'll have other developments coming along. Probably for this council, which we only have a year and a half left, this will be the big development for our term. You know, so again, when I stand to close debate here, I would like to make a motion to that effect, that we would hold this report until we have a decision on the land corp. It might be that that decision is bunk, that council decides that in its direction that we should start a land corp. Council, we're free will people, we all can decide that that's not the case, and that's fine. But I just think as far as due process goes, the right way for us to handle this is make that big decision and then apply it to this piece of land, versus making, you know, this piece of land decision and then making a decision after that. We've sort of missed that opportunity. I really do think it's speaks to opportunity for the city. And again, it's not to say that the land corp is going to pass. It's just that we should make that decision, because if it does pass, it's very relevant to this decision, right? I think that's all for now. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Other speakers to the report? Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks. So I want to put some information on the table, if I could, through a series of questions. One, let's talk about whether the city has, in fact, led a process of land development before, and I'll begin with Ross Industrial Park. Did we lead that process? And if so, could I just get a little information about that, please?
Ms. Orlock?
Through your worship, yes, we did lead that development. It was an industrial development that we did.
So on a ballpark figure, could I ask how much land was involved in that development? Ballpark?
Ms. Orlock?
Through your worship, I'll defer that to Mr. Barr. He'll have the
And
very
while
close
Mr.
number.
Barr is standing, could I ask also over kind of a time frame, how many years did that take?
Mr. Barr?
Through your worship, the last phase of Ross Industrial that we developed was 60 acres of raw land. It yielded 47 acres of land that we sold. And we developed it over 2 years, and we sold the land over about a year and a half.
And if I go back a little bit farther to, say, those initial stages of Ross or to that whole industrial area, when did we begin that process? And am I correct that it was just the city that did that?
Mr. Barr?
Through your worship, it's been about a 30-year process of developing Ross Industrial, and over the first 25 years, the demand was slow and the development would be done in phases.
Thanks very much. So while I am well aware of Ross Industrial, has the city ever done any other, I don't know, lead in terms of development on any other project? I know that Parliament Avenue, for example, could be one example. Is there anything else that staff could offer?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, we were part of the Windsor Park development.
Right. Thanks for that. So if I remember correctly, the Windsor Park, which was a little bit before my time, but was a partnership with the Saskatchewan Housing, and that there was profits generated from that, and some of that profit we used to put to work social housing or attainable housing or rental or housing programs. Would that be an accurate statement?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, yes, that's true.
Thanks. So my point is simply this. I think that we have a terrific opportunity here in terms of land. We have some experience in this. We have decades of experience in doing this. And so I'm not prepared to wait on this one. I think that we have an opportunity. We have some expertise. We have the ability to hire to make sure that this can get done, and I think this is a very good opportunity. So I'm depending on what is said, but my view is that we should carry on with this one. I have some interest in the whole notion of a land corp, and I don't see that these are necessarily tied together. I am interested in a land corp because as we stand here at every council meeting, we always have a lot of requests for dollars and cents, but we spend very little time talking about how we generate revenue. And I want to make sure that we give this a wholehearted discussion on what is possible. So I would look for a motion that would provide a date for when that would come back. I'd be pleased with that and our options, but I want to have a wholehearted debate on that, and I also do not want to miss this opportunity. I'll be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Dowell. Other speakers? Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Worship. And I think I, too, am kind of on that old adage about a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, and I see this as a very good opportunity that we already own the land, and it's my understanding, too, that that portion in the southeast is there's a developer beside that's also interested in moving very quickly, so there may be some synergies if that area starts to grow that we take full advantage. Because I know one of the worrisome risks that I've read in the past reports was when they talked about deferred risk, and I'm not sure if we were starting from scratch and kind of wanting to speculate on buying a bunch of land in different parts of the city, and it may not take off as quickly as this one potentially would. That I think I'd like to see this separated from the land bank debate. I think it's certainly worthwhile having that debate, but I think for this particular project, there's just a number of factors lining up that I think that if we can generate $50–60 million that can be used and applied towards some of our future infrastructure pressures, that this opportunity is kind of unique, and I think I'd be voting to move forward sooner than later. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. I know we're not in the land development business. I'd entertain some discussion down the road on a bank of sorts, but for this particular project, I think it's go time with this, and it's something we need. It was interesting that at executive, the one delegation talked about, yes, but you could have a 30% reduction in your numbers. Okay, instead of 60 million, it's 40 million. It's 40 million we don't have today. Less, I guess less the cost, right? I think it was less 17 million or something like, no, 7 million. So we'd be a net $32 million to the city, even if we lost a 30%. Well, that's pretty good odds, I'd say. for something that we've owned for a little while. My question, I got just a couple of, on the land itself, it says subject property A. To the east of that, do we own that land too? The northeast 141719-West 2.
Ms. Harlock?
Do we own that? And the one south of that?
I believe you do. I think so. Ms.
Thank-
Harlock?
Through your worship, I think that is owned by Dream.
Sorry?
It is owned by Dream.
By Dream? Okay, so we just own subject property A and property B, and that's it. That's all we own in that section of the city, basically, right? Yeah, we're not really in the land game. We're not Saskatoon. I think Saskatoon is 70% owned land around it, and they've done well with it. If we were going to do this, we should have got in the game 40 years ago when Dundee at the time was buying up all the airport land around Harbor Landing. So wise hindsight, but it took 40 or 50 years. So no, I'm totally in favor of this project to go forward. I think this is a great time, and coming from my real estate side, the markets are quieter, and I think everybody has sort of got to get all their stuff together, get all their ducks in a row, because we may never see another boom like 07 and 08, but we are going to see a steady growth increase, because even the projections, I think somebody said, even with the slow turnaround of Calgary, they're going to have 40,000 more people this year, and it's slow. So what are we going to have, 5,000 in Regina, 3,000, 4,000? We need this type of land to go forward, and it's another area. It's southeast, northwest, seem to be the two growths. Harbor Landing is growing, so that's west, but we don't own those lands. And, you know, if we happen to get another chunk of land in 5 years about something and we make another 10 million, great. Maybe that'll fix some more streets and infrastructure deficits, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm all for it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Flegel. Other speakers? Councilor Fraser, if you could take the chair, please. I'm going to support the recommendation before us that we move on this report tonight. And we did discuss this at Executive Committee, and that decision was to move forward on this one. Now, that being said, I know that other speakers may speak to this. Councilor Bryce, you may do this. I want to certainly put words in your mouth here. There's some question about the timing and is this flooding the market, those questions. And from my perspective only, the market decides. But I do know that we have the Home Builders Association. They didn't say don't do this. They said just look at your options. You know, whether you have a developer do it for you or you do a joint venture. Not that you don't do it. The other developer that came in, Harvard, said, not concerned about this. It's market choice, different styles of housing and different audiences, if you will. All very important. So I'm going to support this. I'm doing it because of another public policy objective here. That is a possibility of revenue of about $60 million that we wouldn't have had. Now, this system we're looking at here, looking to have approved, is for a developer to work with us. Is the same process we had for Windsor Park with Sask Housing, so it works. We're not in the land development business. That's not our core business. I know we're going to have a report come back, and I'm going to ask a question of the administration when they can bring it back and have a commitment to do that, so we have that discussion. But these two issues are not inextricably linked together. You can have a discussion of a land development corporation. Away from this discussion doesn't in any way change this at all. So I'd ask members of council to support this tonight, but I would ask the administration through you, Mr. Chair, as to when we could receive the report on a land development corporation.
Through you, Deputy Mayor, we could bring a report back by the end of Q2.
Okay. So I wanted to just remind members of council, because this actually took place before this council sat, how we got to this point. We purchased this land from Sask Housing on the previous council. And we asked the administration to come back with various models on a continuum as to how we would develop this land. And it was to all the way from the selling of the land to what could be a joint venture, could be a land holding corporation, however it might be. And in the middle of that, the administration said, set that aside, let's talk about a land development corporation. Every time it's come forward to executive committee, it's been turned back, and there's been either a no to that or study it again. And the referral motion which I put forward at executive committee was not to bring it back. It was to move, my words, move it off the table and deal with this report. This now, to seize the opportunity now. So we'll come to have that discussion on a land development corporation. And that's not the subject of this report, so I may be out of order on this one. I'm just going to say, though, we'll have the discussion, but let's not delay this report. Let's not delay moving forward on this land. We own 5 to 7% of land for sale in the city. We are not, as Councilor Flagel said, like Saskatoon. We don't have that leverage. It's not our core business. We're going to do a core service review, and it's going to talk about what's our core business, what isn't. I think we need to have a larger questions answer first. But I'd ask members of council to support this, move forward on this one. We have an opportunity to fund social housing, to fund infrastructure, to fund other priorities we have as a city now with this report. We have the report now from the commitment from the administration to come back in the second quarter, by the end of the second quarter, with the report. That's the time for discussion. I don't think we should hold this up at all. We should move forward. Thank you.
Just on process, I know I've spoken. You asked a question on terms of a date come back. Is that a shall or a will or may or?
Through your worship, that is correct.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. I don't actually think there's probably, given the sentiment of the comments, I don't think there's maybe a need for me to bring forward this motion because I think everyone sort of spoke to that notion. I will say that we're dealing with these issues as two separate support reports. I don't necessarily see that moving this ahead now precludes us from having a land corp later. I actually think most Canadian cities have done it and they've had a good experience with it. That have done it have had a good experience. So I see a future where Regina will someday have a land corp. Whether that's right now or not is to be seen, but I appreciate, Mr. Mayor, that we'll have that debate in public in the coming months. So my preference would be that we have that before this opportunity because I appreciate the sentiment that this is such a sweet deal, we're going to make money no matter what, but also as far as our responsibility as citizens, really it's about kind of making the most, using as much due process as we can and making sure if we do have an opportunity to make money for the city, that we're doing it in the best way we can. So I'm not going to support the motion tonight, but I'm heartened to hear that we are going to have a public debate in the coming months about Land Corp in Regina. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Fraser is now closed debate. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, we move on to the citizen nominations for the Regina Airport Authority and the School Board City Liaison Committee. Councilor Fraser.
I rise to bring forward reports. Just a moment here. My mind was somewhere else on that one. I did actually think I was going to vote against it, and my hand went up. Wait, oh boy.
But you voted for it.
I did.
I saw that. The duly noted is unanimous, actually. Let the record show.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, bringing forward report CR 15-29. That's citizen nominees to the Regina Airport Authority. Yeah, this is one of the committees.
Do you want to just name who they are? Just go through the nominations for both.
Okay,
boards?
Sure. So the recommendation from Executive Committee is that we elect Leslie Sizz and Sean McEachran to the Regina Airport Authority, and that Rob, I'm going to butcher this, I'm sorry. Brashani, Rob Curry, Frank Flegel, Kurt Von Paris, Catherine Gagne, Deborah Burnett, Ernie Sismistruck, thank you, and Dale West be appointed to the School Board and City Council Liaison Committee for a term of office effective March 23rd, 15 to December 31st, 2015. And that members appointed to each board committee continue to hold office for the term indicated for each vacancy or until the successors are appointed.
Seconder? Okay. Councilor Murray. Any other comments on it? Questions on the report? Councilor Murray?
Just one quick comment to say a big thank you to everyone who put their name forward for these committees. We do value the input from our citizens, and there was a great deal of people who put their names forward for a limited number of positions. But big thank you to everyone who put their names forward.
Okay, good for that. Other questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We go to Planning Commission. There's 3 reports before us. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thank you. From Planning, the first one is an application for discretionary use, proposed house form commercial, 2310 College Avenue. There's 2 parts of this story I'd like to tell you. The owners of the property wanted to add an actual residence to the back of the property and continue on with the commercial operation that was occurring in this large house and a very stately home. Initially, Planning Commission was not thrilled with what was presented before them and sent it back. So the net result is that there is all of the concerns were addressed, from the landscape, the way it looks in the neighborhood, the way it fits in, and so on. And anybody who was opposed, in fact, became very much in favor of this. So we would seek concurrence. And if I could have a seconder, please.
Councilor Young.
Thank you. So no issue here. Thanks.
Questions or comments on this report? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. Again, from Planning, a discretionary use application, commercial development, 1440 11th Avenue and 1764 Ottawa Street. If I could have a second, I'll speak to this.
Seconder, please. Councilor Murray.
Thanks very much. So this is an existing building that is going to be repurposed. There will, in fact, be 5 businesses that will operate out of here. Restaurant, retail use, and so on would be the notion. We think a convenience store. We think this is a very good idea for the neighborhood because this will bring new services in there, plus also repurpose the building. So again, we had no issue with this one and would seek concurrence.
Councilor Flagel.
Thanks. On a redevelopment question, if this building goes through, well, how many is this in the last 5 years in this particular area? Because it seems like every 3-4 months something else is coming up. Have we got a rough idea in the last 5 years how many buildings like this have been, and areas have been cleaned up?
Ms. Howard.
Through your worship, I'll defer this to Mr. Searle.
Mr. Searle.
Your worship, there have been a few recent applications that have come forward for the 11th Avenue corridor. A couple that come to mind, there are similar commercial repurposes that have occurred, plus the Artful Dodger redevelopment that occurred in near proximity. So certainly it's a trend that we've seen, that there are some new interest in redevelopment along the 11th Avenue corridor in the Heritage neighborhood.
So would we have like 8 or 9, 10, roughly?
Mr. Searle?
Your worship, I'd only be speculating, but it's probably in the range of about 5 to 6 different buildings along the corridor.
Good. That's good to know, because part of this development is key, because this is like one of the original Reginas, and the old fire hall is right there. I mean, et cetera, like there's all, like when you think back, Kramer Tractor used to be there like 50 years ago. And I mean, the building, I think, is part of it's still there. So 50, 60 years ago, actually. And so when we think about heritage, it's not 200-300 years ago. It could be 50 years ago. Even the old fire hall. I mean, that's a beautiful old spot. So I'm all in favor of this kind of stuff.
Thank you, Councilor Flagel. Other speakers? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councilor O'Donnell.
Thanks again. For Planning Commission, discretionary use application, planned group of apartment buildings, 5501 Prefontaine Avenue, Harbor Landing subdivision. If I could have a seconder, please.
Seconder for, please. Councilor Flagel.
Thanks very much. So this is a planned group of 4-story apartment buildings, rentals. I want to emphasize rentals. And just give you a little bit of numbers here. There are 208 units in total and 312 parking stalls. There is a similar development, smaller, just across the street from this. This is part of the development, this is part of the overall concept plan that was planned for this area, so this is not something new. This is just, in fact, filling out the property. So we see some value here. I want to just relay a couple of things from Planning Commission on this one. We specifically asked the developer about going ahead with rental property with a potentially changing market. His response to us was that he was aware that we're probably at that 3% vacancy rate now. He suggested that it may go just slightly higher than that, but he was fine going ahead. So he is one of the people who have developed other rental properties in the city, both south and east, and so he is still firm in the market and wants to go ahead. We also asked him about parking, and specifically about spillover into the neighborhood and so on. So if you will recall, when we talked about what was going on University Park, which also was a very large rental development, those people came into Regina and said, we have about 70% of our spots used, and that we always have vacancy in terms of overall parking. It was interesting for us on planning to hear this developer say the same thing. He never has a full parking lot, that there is always room. So when we asked him, so what would you do differently if in fact parking was adjusted? He was always talking about not creating more density or more units. He talked about adding more amenities, and he used the word to his community. I'm just sharing that was part of the interesting part of the discussion. We thought this was a very good investment in our community, and we would recommend concurrence.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Are there speakers to the report? I had a conversation as well with the developer actually today on that very issue, and they talked as well as other amenities or more landscaping being done as a way to break up the cement everywhere. So that was his comment. So something maybe the Housing Commission could look at as an opportunity for some changes on what we do for our bylaw. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We have 3 information reports. If I have someone move all 3 information reports, we can have speakers to any one of the 3. Okay. Okay, we'll do them individually then. Okay, we'll do them individually. Councillor O'Donnell, you moved the first one, the planning summit, regional planning. Okay. Seconder, thank you. Any comments on that report? It's pretty self-evident it was very successful. I won't comment on that one. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second report, the Mayor's Housing Commission rental vacancy report. Mover for that, please. Councillor Young.
I'll second it.
Second. Comments on that one? Councillor Young, would you like to comment on it?
That we've reached the 3% overall and early, so this is good news. But it was also interesting that there are parts of the city where we have reached the 3%, but there are other parts of the city, like the south end, that's 0.9. So the growth and the vacancy rates vary from one part of the city to the other. But it's a good news report.
Yes.
Yeah. So.
Absolutely. Good. Other comments on the report? Councillor Fraser.
Thank you, through Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to say this is some good news. It's been a long time since this has happened in Regina. Actually, since 2006, Regina has a vacancy rate of below 3%. That just changed last fall. As Councillor Young mentioned, it's not universal across the whole city. And also, while these numbers are the best numbers we have, they're also not totally reflective of different sections of the rental market. So the report mentions like affordable housing. In essence, the vacancy rate is still at 0. So certainly, and for specific types of affordable housing, like if a family has a lot of kids and they need like a 3-bedroom affordable house, those are in very short demand. Just a side note, it's not really to do with our city, which is the topic here tonight, but it's really amazing what's happening in Estevan. Estevan's had one of the lowest vacancy rates in Canada for a long time, and that's gone from below 1% to 12% in just this year with the oil slowdown. So lots of, thoughts with people in Regina that this affects, but Estevan's really having a hard time with it too. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Other comments on the report? Those in favor? Opposed? Carried. You're going to move...
I'll just declare a conflict of interest.
Okay, you want to state why?
Yeah, sure. So this is a report dealing with an upcoming point-in-time count. And along with council, I balance it with my day job at the YMCA of Regina. We're the host entity, or the community entity for the federal government's homelessness partnering strategy. And this upcoming point-in-time count is something that grant funds. So
good.
Thanks.
Just wait for Councillor Fraser to leave the room. So I have a motion to accept the report.
Your Worship, I rise to move the report, point in time count for homeless document that's before us. The recommended disposition is receive and file.
Thank you for that. Seconder, please. Councilor Bryce, any comments on this? I'd like to make a quick comment on this, if I might just. Someone else want to speak?
No, I'll take the
You
chair.
take it. That's right. Thanks.
All the way down the list, we're missing a handful of councillors, but that puts me into the position of Assistant Deputy Mayor. Your Worship,
Just a quick comment. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Just this is a really important report because it actually is dealing with homelessness and how we actually will measure and deal with it. And I guess if you can't measure what you're trying to solve, then you can't identify the problem and how big it is. So this is a one point in time count, but they'll do it again in the next 6-8 months or so. So it's important that council be kept up to speed, that we're dealing with the federal homelessness. You're going to use that with something? Well, I see. Okay. It's about keeping us in tune as to what the federal government's doing on the homelessness strategy, and that will be their responsibility over a 5-year plan. But again, this is the first time we've ever done a count that will actually talk about the extent of homelessness and where it is. So it's a good news report. Thank you.
Thanks, Your Worship.
No other speakers? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move adjournment. Seconder.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone.